So today we are looking at something that you and I do every year privately, but I was sort of thinking about it this time around. We always do this at the end of the year where we typically rank all the games that we played for a full year, both new and old, that we never played before. So replays aren't counted here, but otherwise we're counting every game that, in this case for me, you might do one of your own separate videos, which would be cool. But here we're just doing all the games that I finished for the first time in 2024. And again, normally we do a ranking, but that makes a little less sense than just doing a tier list like we're doing here today, and it sort of better represents the game since mostly we play good games, right?
Yeah.
So I have my wife here with me, who, of course, you were here. You saw a lot of these games, most of which we recently went through the list, so that way you could be reminded of sort of what all the games were, but you remembered a good fair share of them. You even played a lot of them, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So what we're doing today is we're doing simple tier lists, mostly for posterity's sake, just to have a record of this, because, again, I want to say, we've been doing it for the past 5 years. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a really long time. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, it's a pretty long time. I've been doing it since 2019. You've been doing it with me since 2020. So, yeah, this is the 5th one of these that you and I have done, 6 for myself. And, again, normally it's just ranking the games. It's just sort of a good reflection point to look back. That's our main hobby for both of us, is playing video games. And we like to talk about the games that we played and even ones that we didn't see. So some of these you didn't see, usually just a handheld one, so it's not many of those. But we want to do that and sort of upload it so that way we can look back on it at the very least. So whether anybody watched this or not, this is going to be fun at least to look back on. And also, I look back, I keep a record of all the rankings from the previous years, both yours and mine. And sometimes I look back and I don't know how certain games ended up where they were. So this is also to hold me accountable. I'm going to give my thoughts on all these games. You're going to be able to chime in as well with your thoughts, whether you played them or you just spectated them. And that's sort of the idea we're going for. Just something casual, just something fun. There might be some controversial elements, so we'll talk about that a little bit more. But one of the things that you and I did last year, if you recall, was that to make it more fun and exciting, we made a little challenge where both of us did this for each other's lists, where we predicted the top cut of games. So you don't play as many games as me, so it wasn't as many for you. But for me, you made an attempt to guess my top 10. So you picked 10 games out. The order doesn't matter, but you basically picked 10 games that you think I have placed in my top 10, and based on that, we have some prizes. So tell me a little bit. We decided to place prizes. What was it at again?
2, 4, 6, 8, and 10.
All right, so 10 would obviously be you get if you were to somehow got every single one right. All 10 that you picked just so happen to be the top 10 that I pick at the end of this video.
Yes.
And so what prizes am I having to provide in this case?
So the very first prize, if I get 2 right, you have to get me a coffee before work in the morning.
Okay.
And then if I get 4 right, you have to take me a Krispy Kreme and get me 3 donuts and a hot chocolate. And then if I get 6 right, we got to have a movie night. And then if I get 8 right, you got to take me to Build-A-Bear and let me make a bear with all the fixins.
All the fixins as accessories and all?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And then 10, if I get 10 right, we have to do an entire full Haikyuu watch through.
Right, so the Haikyuu anime, not the recap movies. I'm locked in for the episodes, individual episodes, okay? Yeah. And I mean, I did like that movie. We watched the new movie this year. That's not what we're talking about, though, obviously, but okay, so that sounds good. So, like I said, normally we do a ranking. We just sort of work our way back up from worst to best. The reason we're doing a tier list 1 is because obviously a lot less editing. I'm just going to be able to just plop games in where they go, and it's going to be a lot easier that way. But also, I think it better represents the games we're talking about here, because in a ranking, obviously, I don't play, or I try not to play a lot of bad games, but with the amount of games I played, we have 47 games to talk about here. That means some good games are going to be in the latter half of the list, so they're going to look poorly placed if we did a numbered list. So this just makes a lot more sense. It's a lot easier as well. So that's what we're sort of going with. Do you sort of agree with that?
Yeah.
Well, all right. Some things that we'll say off the bat. So first and foremost, let's talk about the games. Again, this is all the games that I finished for the first time this year. So there's no replayed games up here. I thought about including them as a bonus section sort of afterwards. Decided against that because it's probably going to be a long video anyways, but maybe we'll look at doing that in the future. But if you can sort of see down here, We have a good number of games. Now, what I've done to differentiate the 2024 games, because what do we have? We have 47 games total, 14 of which actually came out this year, or in some capacity came out. We'll talk about some fringe cases as we go. But I've put gold borders around all the games that came out this year. So that should hopefully make it a little bit easier to differentiate by the end. And it reminds me, of course, as well, while we're going through, to focus on it a little bit more, because they're the actual games of the year. And we're going to be going in the order of which I beat them. So we're starting in January with the January games and going all the way through to the games I just finished. Just finished the last game 2 days ago. So my memory might be a little shaky. I do have some notes on all the games that we have to talk about here. So we're going to have a good bit. And again, you remember a lot of stuff. It's only a year that we're working with, so it's not too crazy as far as trying to rattle the brain and remember what we're talking about. So that's where we're at as far as that goes. Additionally, I did want to put a disclaimer, especially because of the first game we're going to talk about here, so that might be giving an indication of what we're looking at. But this is based purely on my subjective sort of interest in the game, how I vibed with it. This is not going to be a quality ranking list, like where I see the game as an objective piece of art or its objective quality. This is how much I enjoyed it. And not every game is for every person. So I'm sort of saying that because there might be some games that are really solid, or even some critically acclaimed games that, I might have liked. I don't think I think there's only 2 games on this list that I really disliked. So in that sense, you don't have much to worry about. But, games will be ranked based on how much they resonated with me, So without further ado, let's just sort of jump right into it. You can chime in sort of as we go. A lot of the games, again, you have played or saw a lot of, so you'll have your own thoughts on them. But let's jump right into it. So jumping into January, we actually only have 1 game in January. It was kind of a slow start this year, and it's Nier Automata. So I'll be the first one to say that I was definitely very late to this party. I think the game came out in 2017, 2018 timeframe. So I'm a good handful of years late to this one. And part of the reason I'm saying that is because it really... not in a major way did this one resonate with me. I sort of sat on it for a long time now. I'll give some context. This one's been sitting on my shelf for a good number of years because it's been $20 for a long time. So I picked it up because I heard a lot of great things about it. People had great things to say about the combat and about the protagonist, though I didn't know much going in. I went in pretty much entirely blind other than just knowing its reception. And I sat on it for so long because I wanted to play the first Nier, which I did last year, and I quite enjoyed that game. I thought it had really good characters. I played, of course, the PS3 version, the original PS3 version of the game, and I thought it had, again, solid characters, arcs. The gameplay was fine for what it was. It wasn't anything too complex. I didn't enjoy having to replay the latter half of the story multiple times with minimal changes for alternate endings, but I did do that because I did enjoy the game a lot. So I was looking forward to Nier Automata, again, with the good things I've heard and my good reception of the original Nier. I thought it would be a really strong start to the year, and it really just kind of didn't come together for me. I feel bad about it. It's a game that definitely, has a large number of fans. I definitely want to hear from fans of this game and try to be helped in understanding what is so great about it, because I thought so talking about the story first, because story was a big part of why the original Nier was so good and why that worked for me. When it comes to Nier Automata, the characters are just very bland. 2B, the protagonist, who we see tons of art of and tons of fan material of all the time, just is very bland, blank slate, sort of serious, no nonsense. She really doesn't have a whole lot going on. We had 9S in the game, who was a young man who teams up with her for a majority of the game. He was a lot better. We liked him a lot in his dialogue, but he gets shut down a lot by 2B because of her sort of no-nonsense nature. So there really wasn't anything driving the story characters-wise, at least for me. And the overall themes that the story has to tell about life and about, who is deserving and whatnot. It's all very hit you over the head, sort of been there, done that. And again, I want to own up to being very late to playing this game. If I had played it in 2017, 200 or so games before, where I ended up playing it in my life of playing games, it might have worked a lot more for me. Again, the story about life and death and what really counts as what. Again, if this is your first experience with themes like that about humanity and diversity, then it might work for you better than it did for me. But for me, it just kind of felt pretty plain. I mean, what did you think? Because you saw a lot of the game. We talked about it a lot, especially when I was playing it. Did you have any feelings or thoughts on it?
Honestly, a lot of it did not stick with me. I thought the game had overall like good like graphics and aesthetic, and it had a nice like style. But other than that, I couldn't tell you one thing that happened in the game. I don't remember the plot like at all. And anytime I really seen you playing, it just looked like you're running around a lot.
Yeah, and so it's a sort of pseudo open world sort of game, and it has sort of an action game combat system. And now's probably the time to talk about the gameplay a little bit more, because I was expecting more from it. Now, in terms of controls, it controls a lot better than that PS3 original Nier game. But unfortunately, the combat really didn't feel like that much of a step up. It honestly felt like a little bit of a step down just because the game is so easy. Now, I'll say I played on normal, so maybe on the higher difficulties, but even then I'm not so sure about that. The game has an equipment system where you can equip some pretty broken items. The game pretty early on, I think in the tutorial, introduces you to an equipable chip that makes it so that you'll get re-upped on potions from your inventory automatically. And, I mean, once you slap that back on after the intro, you could spam through everything. In the game, the bosses aren't very aggressive most of the time. The game is kind of short. It doesn't really clock out with too much. It really felt like you could just, spam magic, which in this game, really you just hold down the button the whole time just for extra damage. And you just wail on bosses and do occasional dodging. And it's not flashy. It's not Devil May Cry. It's not, Yakuza even, in terms of the style. So you're not super motivated in any way to engage with its systems. At least I felt. Beyond just button mashing, and the game doesn't provide a difficulty, at the very least on the normal difficulty, to facilitate any interesting gameplay. And the game does feature multiple playable characters, which I thought was a nice refreshing pace from the original Nier, which its multiple endings came from repeating part of that game's story multiple times. This time you do get alternate endings from playing as different characters, but they all control the same. Unfortunately, there was really no difference between them. So all in all, it was really kind of samey. So I would say it's not a bad game. We don't need to harp on this forever. I feel like we did need to explain a little bit, or I needed to explain a little bit my stance on it. I don't think it's a bad game or anything. I'm just saying that I didn't really get the hype for it. So if anyone wants to fill me in on what I missed, they absolutely can. Where I'm thinking right now is a low B, high C tier. I'm thinking of just leaving it at the top of C for now. Obviously, it's the only game that we've ranked, so it's starting at the top of whatever we're putting it in. But I would say, it's subject to change. We might move it to a low B depending on what else ends up in C. But that's what I'm feeling for it. Again, it's a fine game, and when it comes to these rankings, C, that's okay. That's okay to good. B is good to great. A is great, really, and then S is like amazing, like excellent, really great game. So that's what we're looking at sort of as far as that goes. D is going to be for games that, sway into the dislike, or we had some major issues with them, or we didn't like them very much, or I didn't like them very much. So this isn't by any means a damning ranking or anything putting it in C. So we'll leave it there. I'm thinking it might stay at the top of C or move up to B as we go through. But let's get some more games on the list. We won't spend as much time on some of these, or at least on this next one. But let's jump to the next one. The next one is Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Darkness. Now this one, as you know, of course, Aura, is a little bit of a cheeky entry for me because I am counting this separately from its sister releases. Those who are familiar with Pokemon and in general, but as well Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, these games have multiple versions. Explorers of Darkness is the one I played this year, but as a kid, I played many times the other versions of this same story and gameplay, Explorers of Time and Explorers of Sky. So it's like, did I really beat this for the first time this year? Technically, because Explorers of Darkness is its own game that I never had as a kid. I mean, you don't need the alternate versions, really, of the Explorers games or of any of the Mystery Dungeon games that have alternate versions, except Sky, of course, since it's a better third version of this trilogy, but it's no secret that I love this game. I was very excited to play this game. You and I actually played the two sisters versions together. You'd never played before, so for you, it was a blind experience, and for myself it was, I was really excited just to get to replay it. And I hadn't played it in years. It had been a very long time since I last played any of the Explorers games, so I felt like on this playthrough I was very much more able to engage with some of the mechanics I didn't understand as a kid, like IQ especially, was something that I don't think I ever understood when I played it before. This time around I got to enjoy it much more, and it was a cool system, and getting skills and things like that was refreshing. How did you sort of feel about it a little bit? Again, you might do your own video, but sort of, I'm thinking S tier. I mean, I love the story in these games. That's sort of the driving force. I think the gameplay of all Mystery Dungeon games is kind of samey, whether it be Pokemon games or otherwise. The story is what really makes this one, though the gameplay is fun. I like recruiting, I like exploring the dungeons and finding items, saving up money, going on missions, that sort of thing. But so what did you think?
I like the game a lot. I would also put it in S tier. I think any game where you have a friend and you feel like you're actually a part of a team and that character is your friend is like a top tier game for me. So I really just enjoyed every aspect of it, and it had a great story. I loved it.
Yeah, the partner character, especially in the first two generations of Mystery Dungeon games, are very well written. Especially in this one, I really like the arc that the character goes through and what they bring to the table in terms of the story and the progression of things. Especially since, without going into spoilers for a game that's going on 20 years old, but he's sort of the outsider looking in. All the crazy things that happen in the story, all the various twists and reveals, are sort of centered around the player character and some other characters in the story. So the partner is sort of the more grounded in reality of its reality at the very least.
Yeah.
So it really fits with sort of what works as a story. But again, the twists of the story, the emotional moments, the connections, the characters, all really great. One of the things that I don't think is very spoiler related that I do want to touch on is in this playthrough, I definitely wanted to try to get more out of other aspects of the story. Obviously, a lot of the major twists and moments are the ones people talk about. But one thing that I ended up really liking in this playthrough that sort of flew under the radar for me as a kid was Chatot's character. I really like Chatot in this playthrough. He's always seemed like scummy and a grifter to me in the playthroughs I did as a kid and in the anime specials where he's featured as well, because these do have a couple of anime specials as well. So I've never really thought highly of Chatot, but in this playthrough I really focused on sort of his arc and his character and what he's got going on, how he does it. They sort of play around with your expectations for what his character is going to be like, and by the end of the game he surprises you in a lot of ways, and there's some self-sacrificing in there, and there is some really great moments with him. I think I might even like him more than Guildmaster Wigglytuff at this point, who is, of course, Wigglytuff is like an iconic character in this game, very beloved, very funny, and good comic relief at times as well. But Chatot's a character I like a lot. How'd you feel about that?
Yeah, he's very cute. At first I didn't like him too because he was like mean, but that was obviously a fake out.
Yeah, that's what I think as well. Or maybe, he's just a complex character.
He's just stern.
I don't like him taking my money still, but...
Yeah, I don't like that either. But he's right, I gotta pay rent, so he on to something.
He is. So yeah, putting in S tier, this is a very safe pick for me. Again, I've got a lot of nostalgia for the games as well, so it's not a surprise. The next game that we have to talk about is a really interesting one. This is our first 2024 game. It's got the gold border, and it is Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. Now, you and I probably give some context on this. Would you say this was your most anticipated release of the year?
Yeah.
Yeah, going into 2024, we were really excited for this. We usually try to be humble and manage our expectations, but I know we did suspect that maybe this would be like our game of the decade, even.
Yeah.
Game of the century. It did not really live up to that expectation. I'm dropping it in B tier. That's not, I think, where we're going to put it, but there's a lot to talk about. You and I are obviously huge fans of the Like a Dragon Yakuza franchise. For the longest time now, it's been my favorite video game franchise, even though I didn't grow up with it. I'm more of a recent fan last 5 years or so, got into the series back in 2019, and I've really just loved it, loved all the games ever since. I think most of the games in the Yakuza series would not fit on a tier list like this, the S through D. I think most Yakuza games are double S or even triple S, but Infinite Wealth, the issue with Infinite Wealth, well, let's talk about some of the positives first. So the big positives with with Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, or Like a Dragon 8 or Yakuza 8, whatever you want to call it. Um, some of the positives are, of course, the excellent gameplay. This game is a huge improvement over the systems in the previous Yakuza game, Yakuza 7 or Yakuza Like a Dragon here in the West, which introduced the turn-based RPG mechanics, transitioned the series over from beat 'em up, 3D beat 'em up combat to turn-based RPG. And this game is a huge, huge step up from Yakuza 7, which is insane because Yakuza 7, I loved that game when it came out. I thought the gameplay was excellent. It was actually my 2020 game of the year for 2020 games, and it was my game of the year for the entire year. So we obviously loved it. It had a great heartwarming story, and it introduced the new sort of the next guard of the Yakuza characters, Ichiban Kasuga as the new series protagonist. Infinite Wealth is his second title in the starring role. And gameplay-wise, it's excellent. They added so many mechanics like moving around during combat, tons of new classes and skills to use and ways to carry over skills to other classes. It's all excellent, especially the combat, though the side activities in this one are also crazy. The Yakuza 7 game had a sort of Pokemon collecting mechanic. This one expands that from not just Pokemon collecting, but a sort of Pokemon battling type system where the enemies in the game get registered and you can sort of collect them and battle with them. It's very cool. There's also the Animal Crossing parody Dondoko Island, which I didn't personally experience all of yet, but it had a lot of depth to it. It seemed very cool. It was a more realistic sort of ish take on it, at least graphically speaking, and that was a lot of fun. I think the biggest issues gameplay wise, which again isn't a lot, is just that the game still is very slow to start. It was a complaint with Yakuza 7 as well, that you don't get access to class switching until a unacceptable length into the game. I think it's chapter 5 or 6 in both games, which you think they would have improved on this time around, got us to that aspect quicker. And then I think just some general pacing things, like you and I noticed this, that they sort of really force you to engage with all of the side content instead of just letting you discover it. In a title like Yakuza 6, you know, many of its side content like drink links and the scuba diving is hidden away. They don't force you to tutorialize it during the story. And in this game, it sort of felt it worse than any other game in the series, probably. They force you to do the Crazy Taxi parody game. They force you to do the Pokemon battles game. They force you to go to Dondoko Island for a few days. It totally kills the pace of the story, especially in that case. But not too bad. Those aren't things that you feel. I would say the biggest source of disappointment for us and why we're going to be negative leaning this discussion going forward is definitely the story and the characterization, which are two very different things. I want to preface. That's sort of two issues. Now, Yakuza and story, you and I have, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you and I have always felt that they have great stories. And while not everything is 100% grounded in realism, and there are things, you know, people, especially fans in the community, will cry rubber bullets about Yakuza 4 all day and all night. But we like the stories in these games. I like Yakuza 4's story. I like Yakuza 6's story a lot. Yakuza 0, 3, 1, even 5. Even 5, you and I got a lot of enjoyment out of the story. And this story felt like the weakest one so far, which is always concerning when it's the most recent title, because then you're worried that they're going to all be like that going forward. That's an indication of a drop that's coming, or a drop that we're already in now. So we won't know more probably until another game is released. But the story in this one really is kind of all over the place. Yeah, and I wonder how much is too much to go into for spoilers. We have a lot of weird contrivances in the story. The game also had a prequel game that came out at the tail end of last year, Like a Dragon Gaiden, and it has numerous plot holes in relation to that game, which is super bizarre because it was pitched as, you know, this is to get you ready for this game, play this little miniature game. And so that was weird, but you have sort of this crazy two-part storyline in Infinite Wealth between Hawaii and Japan in a conspiracy involving former Yakuza after Yakuza 7 sort of had this big disbanding of major Yakuza organizations. And this game sort of takes it in some weird directions that just don't feel supernatural, and characters from the last game are very passive in the conflict in this one, so it just feels very contrived. And I don't know how much we can really go into it. I mean, it's sort of rough. It's just rough with where they took things. Again, the ties between this game and the previous game and Ichiban, the new protagonist, just don't really work. There's a huge time skip in this game as well that might disconnect players, but I felt like the introduction to the game was probably the strongest part. And sort of following up where Ichiban is, he's working to help rehabilitate former Yakuza. That was very cool. Has a strong start, but it just sort of goes off the rails when the group goes to Hawaii and the former series protagonist, Kazuma Kiryu, is reintroduced and sort of ends up stealing the show. Did you sort of feel that way?
Yeah.
And so that sort of gets us into the characterization conversation. I think we can talk a little bit more about this one. This one definitely, I felt like, hurt the characters, the returning characters in the series. With Ichiban, it's sort of rough because this is Ichiban's second title. I mean, think about it like if this was his Yakuza 2. And he really gets sidelined hard. He starts the game off really strong. He is our lead for definitely the first few chapters. But once Kiryu is introduced into the story and they become dual protagonists, it feels like the game leans heavily Kiryu. And Ichiban, sort of, his story is less important. And he ends up sort of falling off, especially in the late game. The final boss is fought by Kiryu. They both get a final boss, but Kiryu's is the one that's more impactful and emotional and has, even though that scene, that whole thing is incredibly contrived and ridiculous, the intention was definitely to put the focus on Kiryu. And Kiryu has the more emotional story. Ichiban, his story in this game, this isn't a spoiler, this is the setup for the game. Ichiban is, he goes to Hawaii to meet his long-lost mother, who had to give him up sort of in a high-intensity situation that they talk about a lot in Yakuza 7. And it turns out she's alive and living in Hawaii, and Ichiban has to go there to give her a memento of his father. But he states pretty early on that he doesn't care about her really, and he just respects her as the wife of his boss, his Yakuza boss. He's not seeking any mother-son relationship or something that he missed out on with her. And I mean, that's a fine take to have, but it doesn't make for very interesting storytelling or drama. There ends up being a whole conspiracy with her, but by the time they do finally sort of tie up that loose end, Ichiban maintains his previous stance that he is not really emotionally interested in this connection. And again, it's a unique take. I think a lot of people wouldn't see it coming. So in that sense, it's interesting, but interesting doesn't always mean compelling, you know?
Yeah.
And that's sort of where he clocks out. Now, Ichiban and family, it's actually a huge part of the story, or it's a huge part of Kiryu's story, unfortunately. There is a lot of family, we're not going to go into the specifics, but there are a lot of family reveals about Ichiban, and he does find out about them, and he does not care, and they end up being the focus of Kiryu's side of the story, which feels really out of place and sort of reversed based on how it should be. Kiryu's side of the story is a lot weirder, so they introduce this. It's also not a spoiler because it was in the trailers, but Kiryu, his big conflict in this game, of course, is that he has cancer, and a big part of his story is sort of coming to grips with the inevitable and winding down his life, which makes for a really compelling hook to his story. Unfortunately, the game goes out of its way in many instances to undermine pretty much everything to do with Kiryu and his cancer storyline. He has the most contrived cancer source, I suppose, is how to put that. He gets cancer. In the trailer, we just get told that he has cancer, and I think that that's really compelling to give a long-time video game character a terminal illness that's just uncontrollable. But of course, when we play the game, we find out immediately that he gets it through the most ridiculous, contrived way possible by breaking his suit while working in like a nuclear disposal facility. It's ridiculous. It's stupid. The way he breaks his suit is dumb. He shouldn't even be there. It's a whole plot hole with the prequel game that they put out late last year for this one. It's just ridiculous. And then, while the game pretends that it's going to wind down Kiryu and that this might be a real finale to his story, they do not deliver any sort of conclusive ideas to him. This game does not conclude his story, if that is considered a spoiler. And they also give him they put a lot of weird ideas in his head, like that, at the end of the game, he declares he's like Yakuza Jesus. which I really didn't jive with. I really was not big on the whole him
Yeah.
being like, I have to accept all the sins for every Yakuza who's ever existed in history. That seemed kind of ridiculous, especially since his whole story ever since the very first game has been like escaping from the Yakuza and leaving that life behind. And while he was
Yeah,
in the Yakuza, go ahead.
it was just really really weird because you didn't have to do all of that. Right? They didn't have to do makeup cancer, and then they also didn't have to make him Yakuza Jesus. And they also didn't have to blame everything on him. And it doesn't make sense to blame everything on him when he has tried to leave many times. And there have been many times where he has just been gone for years.
Right. I would say from Yakuza 4 especially onwards, he's really very passively involved. The only times he gets involved is when someone is forcing him to be involved. So I don't think he has to accept responsibility for all the Yakuza. It seems very silly, especially since in the scene where he does this, there are significant former Yakuza figures in the scene with him that are actually responsible for like what's going on and the disbandment from 7 and everything there. Everything is just so weird. We've reached a point in Yakuza where the storytelling feels like it revolves around Kiryu, and it never really felt that way before. You know, especially like in a game like 6 where his only involvement with Yakuza is that someone roughs up his daughter and he's just like, if you guys are involved, I'm killing everybody. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the world doesn't revolve around him in the other games, and this one it absolutely does. It I don't know. We didn't like it. I didn't like Kiryu's portrayal in this game. I didn't like his story about being Yakuza Jesus. I didn't like his cancer storyline either. I think it could have worked even with the goofy setup of the nuclear reactor, nuclear waste disposal, whatever setup. Could have been fine, but Kiryu pushes himself constantly in a game where there are a million other people that could be doing what he's doing. He doesn't have to go crazy and solo the final boss in this game. There's like there's like 7 or 8 other people in the room with him that don't have cancer and are younger and sprier and could just gang up on this guy and beat him up. It's fan servicey. The whole game is very fan servicey. There's also a fight towards the end of the game that we saw a lot of in trailers. A fight between Kiryu and a lot of his former allies, and in the actual game, the fight is totally pointless. It really means nothing because those characters are just being flanderized anyway. There's no point to fight them. It's just very fan servicey. The game is very fan servicey. I do feel that maybe the Yakuza franchise achieving some mainstream attention now has maybe forced them to sort of aim lower with the game stories and characters. But I'm not gonna go crazy on it, especially since I haven't touched the game since we finished it. We finished it early February, and I have not played it since. So I probably am due for another run-through before I give big, sweeping speeches about, not beyond just my subjective opinion and go towards more objective criticisms. But I think all in all, we got to police this game. We've been talking about this is one of the games we're going to talk about the most, though, in fairness, because again, this was our most anticipated game of the year. We thought it was going to be game of the year for both of us, and I don't think it's going to even come close to that because there were some pretty stacked releases this year. I don't think the game is bad or anything. I still think, at the end of the day, we've been a little negative, but again, the gameplay, huge improvement. We didn't talk about Hawaii either. This game includes the first district explorable area outside of Japan, and it is in Honolulu, Hawaii, which is it's a huge environment to explore with tons of side content to engage with and tons of things to explore and shops, and it's massive. It's massive what they managed to fit into that Hawaii hub area, and the gameplay overall is a huge improvement. And I think when it comes to quality in games, while the story and characters were not there, that's definitely more subjective, and it's also not what everyone is looking for in a game. Other people, will say gameplay is king, and I agree with that with a lot of games to a certain extent as well. But I think the overall quality of this game is incredibly high. So I'm still thinking it's probably somewhere in the A tier just because of that. But again, compared to other Yakuza games, this would be one of the lowest. This would be one of the lowest in terms of that franchise. Would you agree?
Yeah.
So
Probably the lowest.
that's what I think too. I mean, some of the remakes are kind of shaky in their quality. If we're counting just fully original titles, I would probably put this one
Yeah.
as the lowest, maybe just with Yakuza 1, but that game has so much charm to it, so I don't know. But we'll leave it in A tier. Again, it's still a very good game. Highly recommend it for some fun RPG combat. And again, there's some moments in the story that work. It's not totally lost. They could definitely pull it back. I haven't lost all hope in the franchise or anything, but I'm definitely weary, and I'm weary about this Majima game that's coming out in February, I think, coming up. But these next couple are going to be a lot quicker. So finally, we're going to be knocking through some quick. We have Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. Interesting thing I have in my notes on this game is of course, for those who don't know, this game is a GameCube Pokemon RPG that focuses on double battles. It's a sequel to another GameCube game, Pokemon Coliseum, of a similar premise, where it's double battles and also you catch your Pokemon from other trainers. They have shadow Pokemon that you must steal to purify their hearts. So you're saving them, sort of, by stealing them. But I have in my notes here, it's very interesting that I played Coliseum 5 years ago, and this game, story-wise, takes place 5 years after Coliseum. So just a little happy accident that ended up happening. That wasn't intentional by any means. I just ended up picking it up because I really wanted to check it out. And it's really fun. This is some of the most fun I've had with Pokemon battling in a long time. Now, of course, I don't play competitive, so I'm really just talking about a Pokemon single-player experience. But the game really gave me a lot of appreciation for double battles and how that sort of makes things a lot more complex and interesting. Of course, there's also no switch mode, so there's no free switching your Pokemon out. So all in all, I think it's a really great RPG. It's very charming. I'm putting it above. I'm just spitballing this, but I think it's A tier as well. I think I like it a little more than Infinite Wealth just because the story soured me so much on Infinite Wealth. And also, it's just very charming. It's charming for when it came out. It looks very good. Some of the animations are still high quality and hold up to this day. It's no surprise that people will use these GameCube games to sort of as ammo to attack the modern games and say bad things about their animation quality because these games do look very charming. There's no other way to put it. Obviously, they have aged, but there's a lot of charm to them. Their animations and models, in some cases, look higher quality than the modern day models, even compared to them. And for the time, it's very cool. The story's pretty whatever. It's nothing groundbreaking, but it's inoffensive and it has some cool moments. I like the robot Kyogre that you can ride and the robot Groudon that like one of the bosses uses. I wish we could fight it though. That's kind of disappointing, but all in all, it's very fun. I think also these two games on GameCube, Coliseum and XD, they're both very interesting when it comes to team building and getting, stealing other people's Pokemon, not having wild Pokemon to rely on. So a lot of fun. Did you notice anything particular about this one?
No, just that it had cute vibes.
Yeah, again, we don't have as much to say about that one for sure. Next up, we have Super Mario Bros. Wonder, which came out last year. We kind of slept on it. When this game was in pre-release, I was concerned that it was going to be just a glow-up for new Super Mario Bros., that 2D Mario series. And you and I didn't like those games. We played one last year. We played U last year, New Super Mario Bros. U, and disliked it. Strongly felt it had very archaic design habits that didn't resonate with us very well. And we aren't really 2D platformer people. We don't have a lot of nostalgia for Mario really at all, but especially not 2D Mario. But Mario Bros. Wonder, it won me over a little bit. I felt a little bad about skipping over it last year, so I made sure to prioritize it early this year. And it is a game of high quality. It is very good. It is very different from those new Super Mario Bros. Games that were coming out. It's very different from 2D Mario. It's an evolution of that formula. And I had a lot of fun. I nearly 100% of this game. I mean, I could always, it's fun. I could always go back, pop back in, and continue getting the collectibles, because sort of like the 3D Mario games, in this game you have collectibles to get in every level, and they are your gate to progression. But the game has a lot of cool mechanics. For one, the badge system, which gives Mario some extra moves that you can equip, like double jumps, or some other thing. It's been a while since I played it. I remember using the double jump a lot, because you get one of those as a badge that you can equip. I don't remember hardly any of the other ones. I guess some of them were about just improving some of Mario's other things and giving him weird interactions with the environment. It was all very fun to experiment around with, and there were also a lot of fun mini challenges to engage with that were a lot of fun. The game features a lot of playable characters, though I don't think there were any differences between them this time around, which is unfortunate, because a game like Mario 3D World I think did a very good job of making the characters have little traits that differentiated them. But it's nice for flavor to have a bunch of different characters. You have like Yoshi's and Toads, and then Mario, Luigi, Daisy I think is in this one, and Peach. So a lot of customization as far as that goes. But all in all, it's just a great time. And the levels, I was kind of surprised as well. I figured one of the big selling points of the game in trailers was that it was wacky. It had a bunch of weird gimmicks, like the whole level would be black and silhouetted, so you had to sort of navigate through it, where enemies would start behaving in weird, imaginative ways. And I did not think that every level in the game, of which there's quite a few, there's a solid number of levels in each world and a good number of worlds as well as post-game content, and every world has something. They don't even repeat ideas very often, so it felt very fresh. They put a lot of effort into this one. I liked it a lot. Definitely my favorite 2D Mario game right now. Next up is Sonic Generations 3DS. This one is definitely just a low C, maybe even D. We'll sort of flirt around with it. This one, of course, to give some context, the 3DS version of Sonic Generations is very different from the console version of Sonic Generations, both of which launched in 2011. The main reason, of course, that I bothered to pick this up and play it this year was, one, because I'd never played it before, and it does have different level themes from the console version of Generations that I'm very familiar with. But also in preparation for a game we're going to be talking about later, which is Shadow Generations, which was a new game announced early this year, like January, February. So pretty much right after that announcement, I went and picked up the 3DS version and got it. It's not great. I would say it's not good, actually. But, you know, it's passable. It's all in 2D, which is disappointing for a 3DS game. The 3DS is capable of more. It was cool to see alternate levels be chosen. Like, for example, in the console version of Sonic Generations, the Sonic Adventure representative level is Speed Highway, and in the 3DS version, it's Emerald Coast. So that's cool. It's cool they picked different levels. Sonic Rush also got a level. I think Sonic Generations, and many people have echoed this opinion over the years, it would have been much better if it was like a tribute to handheld Sonic. And so they had like Sonic Rush levels and Sonic Advance levels and Game Gear levels from the Sonic games. So a lot of missed opportunities with this one, but I wanted to play it. It's fine. It's actually got some decent remixes. Not all of them are that great, but some of them are good. I like 3DS. Egg Emperor from Sonic Heroes got a remix, and Big Arm from Sonic 3 and Knuckles got a remix. So all in all, pretty good. I know you didn't see hardly any of this game. Any game that's handheld, those are the games that you mostly missed. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah.
So yeah, not much to talk about with that one. Next up, we have Bomb Rush Cyberfunk. This was a cool one that I got sort of notified about through some indie game videos online that on YouTube, obviously, that are really cool. I like the game a lot. I think it's more of a B tier. I think it's gonna be our first B tier game. I don't think it has mechanics that rival some of the big extreme sports themed games. This game is obviously sort of Jet Set Radio, Tony Hawk inspired indie game where you're doing a lot of tricks and achieving high scores on skateboard, roller skates, and a bike. Though I hardly ever used the bike. I don't even think the bike was mandatory for any missions, to my recollection. But it's really fun. The music is really good. The graffiti stuff and the art style is fun. One thing that I will say about this game that surprised me was that it has a story, which I knew about, and the production value is very low. But the story is actually surprisingly interesting. It has its own twists and turns in it, and I'm not going to spoil it. It's very charming. I would say if you pick this game up and you're like, this story looks like it's going to be bad, but I want to, go trick crazy, and I've played all the Tony Hawk games already, you might be surprised by how crazy the story gets. Though there are bosses in this game, or at least one boss in this game, and I didn't like that. But everything else was pretty good. I'd say it's a solid B tier, maybe even low A tier. We'll sort of see how it goes with that. And I need to get on that soundtrack, because I haven't really listened to the soundtrack since just playing the game, but there were some tracks in it that I really enjoyed. Next, we have a surprise hit. This is Persona 5 Tactica. So this was announced last year alongside Persona 5 Reload. I think they were announced on the same day. Definitely was overshadowed by Reload, because that's obviously a full remake of a mainline Persona game, and this is a silly Persona 5 spinoff, which are somewhat hit or miss. I liked Strikers, which was the sort of the Dynasty Warriors type gameplay adapted with the Persona 5 characters and a story, and I liked that game a fair amount. And this game, too, I actually liked quite a bit. I think this is an A-tier game. I was kind of surprised. Now, lately I have been getting into tactics games a little bit more. I haven't hit Fire Emblem yet. I'm eventually getting to that point, but I've been playing one-off tactics games a lot, and Final Fantasy Tactics as well I really enjoyed a couple years ago. And this game has what I thought was great puzzle-like tactics elements. I didn't love the small party size. That's something that we'll be talking about with some other games that we'll be looking at a little bit later on. Actually, with the next game we'll be talking about, we'll mention that. But the game surprised me by adding a fourth party member, sort of at the end of the second act, which was awesome. That was like hugely invigorating and really boosted the fun factor of that last third of the game, which is when you need a boost like that in games like these. In long RPGs with long combat, that was the perfect way to do it. The game actually does have a heartwarming story. I would say this is probably my favorite, maybe my favorite Persona 5 story overall. That's not to say there aren't parts of Persona 5 and Royal that don't hit higher highs than this game, but consistency-wise, and this game's length is much shorter than those games, so it doesn't have to contend with hundreds of hours of keeping its relevance high. I thought it had a great story. The new characters in this game, Arena and Toshiro, I think were their names, they have a very compelling, interesting story, and I was feeling some things with the climaxes of their arcs. I guess this game maybe I'm blowing too much smoke up this game's ass, because the general Persona 5 cast doesn't have a whole lot to do in this game. They don't go through any crazy arcs, whereas in like Strikers they did. So maybe recency bias is getting me, but I enjoyed this game a lot more than I thought I was going to enjoy it. I'm putting it in A tier, I think right now, still below Mario Bros. Wonder, but still a great title. I had a lot of fun with it. Now the next title we have to talk about is this is interesting. So you may have noticed from the intro, but I included a lot of Xenoblade Chronicles clips amongst the clips of games that actually came out this year. One thing that I've done in all the years that I've done sort of this year-long tracking where I track all the games I play and then I rank them at the end of the year, every year has one or more franchises that are like the theme franchise, where I challenge myself to sort of like spend the whole year immersing myself in one or more franchises. And this year, it pretty much exclusively was Xenoblade Chronicles. That was the franchise that didn't have any entries come out this year or anything, but that I focused all my energy into. I've always wanted to play Xenoblade Chronicles ever since I saw Shulk in Smash Bros. I can't remember if he was in Brawl or if he was in the Wii U game first, but wherever he first appeared, I thought he was super cool. I really wanted to get into it. I've actually tried to get into Xenoblade Chronicles a lot over the years, and finally this year I did. I played all 4 mainline games, so we're going to see them. You can see X over here as well. So we'll be talking about all 4 games, but sort of the thing I unfortunately have to say is that these games, for the most part, now there are some caveats, but for the most part, these games, similar to Nier Automata, did not really resonate with me. I think there's a lot of hurdles to sort of get through with these games. Now, to give a little bit of context, I did try to get into this series before. This was not the first time I ever played any of these games. The first time I played any Xenoblade Chronicles game was actually the 3DS, or the new 3DS version of Xenoblade Chronicles that came out. I played it for about an hour and it just did not click with me. And then I got X for Wii U, same copy that I ended up playing this year. And sort of same thing. I played it for like an hour when it came out because it looked really cool, and it just did not. I did not get it to click. And I think it's because when you see a character in Smash Bros, you get this action-oriented idea from them, and these games are very much not action-oriented. These are RPGs that they're like a step below the active time battle systems that you see in like certain Final Fantasy games, like Final Fantasy 8, 9, 7, but they're above turn-based RPGs. And they're sort of in between those. These games are basically cooldown timers. The game, you whenever you go into combat, you have a bunch of skills at your disposal, and they're on cooldown timers that you have to wait for them to cycle back around and use. And it's not for me, I don't think. You have to do a lot with a combat system like that. These games also have very limited party sizes. Xenoblade 1 and 2 have a max party size of 3 characters, and it makes combat very overwhelming when you're fighting more than one foe. And the combat, especially in 2, but we're not talking about that, is slow in these games. Story-wise as well, that was the main thing I'd heard positive about these games, was that they had really amazing stories. The fact of the matter is that these are Final Fantasy light stories. They're very, I don't want to say derivative, but they're clearly inspired by what every mainline Final Fantasy sort of sets out to do, bring together a party of unlikely heroes and, set them off on a world-trotting adventure. So if you played a lot of Final Fantasy games and then you come to Xenoblade Chronicles, you might be, I don't know, it sort of depends. I love Final Fantasy, so I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. I think the bad thing that sort of comes with these, and it's another big hurdle with these games, is that these games typically, I would say, don't have as much to say as your average Final Fantasy game in terms of, interesting twists and tackling, social issues or high concept stuff. But they have, like, at least double the runtime. So your average Final Fantasy game might run you somewhere around like 40 hours. These games run like 80 hours on average. And they really, the length is the kryptonite for this series. The combat systems as well. Again, I've already talked a little bit about not really loving the cooldown timers aspect of these games, but there are plenty of other aspects that plague all these games that make them not fun gameplay-wise to be around for like a Persona game's length. And then it doesn't help that their stories sort of meander a lot. That's another issue. Pretty much all of these games, all 4 that we're going to talk about, start off very strong, and then they meander around way too much to the point where I think I lost the plot in some of these. Not in terms of not understanding what's going on, but just being like, oh my gosh, can we get on with it? Can we get on with it? Like, what are we doing? So that's sort of what we have going on with that. They also, like with many RPGs, there's very cumbersome crafting systems in these games. They often have annoying growth mechanics, either restricting your levels or making the growth of your characters or of your equipment very annoying or incremental. I don't know. There's so many things to talk about these. I could make a whole video on each one of these and about all the issues that I felt they could have just not done and the game would have been better for it. But let's focus on just Xenoblade Chronicles. When it comes to Xenoblade Chronicles, this was the one that for a while was my favorite out of these games, even though I didn't love it or anything. And when it comes to Xenoblade Chronicles, has a great start. I think story-wise, the introduction of the story is very intense. You're put on your player character and best friend are going on a revenge mission to avenge a recently fallen childhood friend. And you're going up against a force that is near indestructible, but of course you have the one thing that can stop them. Again, very Final Fantasy-esque. But again, the story meanders around for a lot, and the other party members that join, there isn't great party synergy. You end up recruiting a lot of different characters of different walks of life. They don't interact a whole lot. One of the funniest things, I think, to do with the party that sort of comes together in this game is that there's a goofy, small mascot, cute character that gets added to your party, Ricky, who's a Nopon, which is a species that's in all of these games. And he is so goofy and ridiculous and sort of out of touch with the tone of the rest of the game that he is not allowed to talk in most cutscenes. Anytime that something serious is happening in the story, you can see Ricky on screen, maybe like half of him. The camera is trying to pretend he's not there. And he gets no lines. He gets almost no lines in any serious cutscene. He's just there for comic relief. And it definitely feels like every time I see him, which I tried to forget about him, I was annoyed at all that he was added. I didn't like his little arc where he gets added to the party. I felt like it was a huge waste of time, and then I was mad that he was becoming a party member. But I forgot he was there most of the game. Because, again, he's just like comic relief dialogue in throwaway scenes. Anything important, he is not allowed to talk. The developers have put a big duct tape over his mouth. They're not interested in hearing from him in most of the moments in the game. Which, at the very least, I suppose that's better for the story. But it's just an embarrassing he's an embarrassing blemish on an otherwise interesting story. The game has a decent story. I think some of the twists and the way they undermine certain character deaths, kind of made the suspense of the game feel lesser. And the game's big twist, which they also reuse in the second game that we won't go in depth on, kind of, is pretentious. I get what they're going for, and they think they're really crazy and like, whoa, my gosh. But, and I know it's not helpful that I'm not going into it, but it just sort of doesn't come off as very cohesive in terms of like just getting immersed in a world when they pull big sort of meta twists. That's what I can say. There's a big meta twist associated with every game in this franchise, unfortunately, and that, in my opinion, hurts the fantasy aspect of these games, even if it is sort of interesting. Again, marginally. But overall, I don't think the game is bad or anything. I'm definitely, talking mostly about negative stuff. This game is mostly harmless. The biggest bad things that I can say about its gameplay is that it's very repetitive. I don't think playing as the other characters, because you can switch your controlled character. You don't have to play as the main character, Shulk, the whole time. And so that's cool. But the other characters aren't terribly fun to play. By the end of the game, it's definitely overstayed its welcome, whether you've been switching characters or not. And the growth system is very restrictive in this game. They, once you have leveled up beyond the enemies that you're fighting in the area that you're in, you're not getting hardly any XP for them. You're not getting hardly any upgrade points for your skills either. So it just kind of, it's annoying in any RPG where it won't let you overlevel. It won't reward you for fighting enemies, because then once you hit a certain level, fighting enemies is annoying, and you just want to skip it. You don't want to do it at all because the combat isn't really that fun. So that's sort of the main issue that we're looking at there. It's not a bad game. I have some other thoughts. This is going to be one of the higher ranked Xenoblade Chronicles games, unfortunately. But again, this is another one where I'm very late to the party as well. Just like with Nier Automata, I'll stress that as well before we wrap up talking about this one. This game came out on the Wii, So very, very late to the party, unfortunately, with this one. So I have to own up to that. I'm in the wrong place in the wrong time with these games. But we'll move on from that. We'll be talking more about Xenoblade as we continue through the rest of the franchise, but we have a bunch of games that we can knock out quickly here. First, we have Jak and Daxter: The Lost Frontier, sort of a less than favorable spin-off in that franchise that became recently pretty available since Sony added it to its classics lineup, where they've been sort of putting those PSP and PS2 games on PS5 and PS4. So this was a cool one to play through. I've had it on Vita for a while, but for whatever reason, just hadn't gotten around to giving it much attention. So when it came out on PS5 with full trophy support, I was all over that. It's really not that bad. I played through it pretty much. Well, I got the platinum, so I basically 100%ed it, at least as far as they were concerned. And it was a pretty fun time. I think it's definitely overhated because it's very easy for people to make videos about it, a less accessible game in this case, and just sort of rant and rave about it, like, oh, they changed the character designs and the story isn't that good, and it's got all these gameplay problems, but it's on the PSP. But honestly, it's a cute little title, and I think it has a lot of interesting ideas that serve the Jak and Daxter franchise pretty well. I like the eco powers being brought back and sort of mingling that with level exploration and gunplay in some new and interesting ways. And I think the sky combat is honestly, it's pretty logical step up from the combat racing of X and the Mad Max style racing of Jak 3 and the GTA style vehicles of Jak 2. Vehicles are kind of a huge part of Jak and Daxter's identity. I think a lot of people don't really acknowledge that the way they should. So Jak and Daxter: Lost Frontier sort of expanding into these plane battles, these dogfights. It fits the series pretty well to me. I think it's honestly a little more fun and to mess around with the customization and guns and equipment and all the different little challenges more than Jak 3's. I'm not saying this game is better than Jak 3 or anything, but it's a fine time. I get the character designs being changed and the voice actor for Jak being changed was pretty lame. But all in all, it's fine. I don't even hate it as a Jak game. I think it's fine to fit into Jak canon. We're never getting another game ever anyway, so, who really cares? It's fine. It's a B-tier game. I'd put it above the other two games in B-tier. And then we have Nekopara Volume 3. So, you probably can't really tell it's Volume 3. I played Volume 1 and 2 back in 2022 to see what they were sort of all about, because it seemed, somewhat interesting. They're, of course, visual novels that follow a linear story. There's no choices or mini-games like you might see in key visual novels, which I think are much higher quality products. These are going to be our first well, this one is going to be our first D tier, but not because these are necessarily betrayals of what they set out to do. They set out to accomplish something very basic. These are borderline not video games. You know, the gameplay in these is click, click, click through the dialogue, and I think it just barely qualifies as a game. So I can't. Maybe it's low C. It's either low, low, low C. Like it regardless of where we put it, whether it's the high D tier or low C tier, I would consider these games, even at their highest quality, to be the border between okay games and bad games. Any game that is bad in a sense where I really disliked it would go below these. Any games that I was okay or neutral on and up would go above it. So I think we're going to have these sit at the top of the D tier. Volume 3, to go into a little bit about it, even though, again, it doesn't really matter that much. Volume 3 is, of course, about the main character romancing the last two of his family's 6 cat girls, in this case being Maple and Cinnamon. And all in all, it's a fine little story. All of these sort of play out the same way, where he helps out the cat girls from his family, accomplish a goal of theirs, or he gives them some confidence, and through his kindness and compassion they fall in love with him. And then if you have the adult content enabled, things get pretty crazy. We won't go too much into depth on that side of the contents, not for everybody obviously, but these games are pretty short. I would say that the 2 volumes we're going to be looking at today, volume 3 here and then later volume 4, are much longer than the first 2 volumes were, so there's a step up in at least them having more going on, in a sense. I definitely liked volume 3 more than volume 2, but volume 1 had a lot of world building, so I don't know, they're kind of the same place, but they're kind of bleh. They're just whatever. There's not much to talk about with these, unlike our next game, which we do have quite a bit to talk about. So you and I got to play through Pokemon Scarlet and Violet this year, and I'm just...
Yep, you already know. Yeah, go ahead, plop that right in the D tier.
Yeah, I'm gonna drop it right here for while we talk about it. I do think there's a lot that we can say about it. We probably shouldn't go on for a million years about our grievances with this game. To give some context again for what's up with us, you and I have been in a place where we are not buying new Pokemon games when they come out, hence why we're pretty behind. I think what Scarlet and Violet came out the end of 2022, I want to say, so we're about a year and a half out from when these games came out. Basically, you and I, my thing, ever since Sword and Shield, which came out in 2019, I think, has been to, not buy the games new at launch, vote with our dollar and then get the games used secondhand by some other means to both save money and to, again, not give our money directly to the Pokemon Company, because we just don't support the quality of these games and the way they come out so half-baked. You and I were very excited about Scarlet and Violet this year because of all those shiny hunting videos that we watched. It seemed like the game had some cool aspects to it. I thought the game had some very interesting ideas, with it having the 3 story routes, giving alternate win conditions to just doing the 8 gyms. Unfortunately, in execution, pretty much everything in this game, except for the shiny hunting, which was something I was excited about, in fairness, is incredibly undercooked. We went into this game with low expectations, and somehow still came out surprised by the lack of quality and disappointed by the content overall. It's kind of crazy. So I guess starting with the story content, the 3 story path ideas, I think you think a little bit differently about this. I think it was a good idea, just executed terribly.
I think I was just bored the entire time, and I wouldn't even say half cooked or half baked. I would say the ingredients are in a bowl sitting on the counter, and I'm sitting there looking at it like, when are they going to put this in the oven and make some cookies? Because everything in the game is it just feels like it's not finished at all. Like the customization, the fucking grass.
Everything in the game has a very rushed feel to it. I think I get sort of where you're coming from on that.
Every single time that I did a picnic, it glitched.
Yeah,
every time, every
and
single
same
time.
for me. I had to restart, so I,
Yeah.
I definitely wanted to talk about the glitches. I will say with the rushed aspect, one thing that I wanted to say was when it came to the three alternate stories, the traditional gym challenge, the Titan storyline, and the Team Star storyline, the way that these feel, it feels like they took the amount of effort they typically put into the gym challenge in these games, which is already very cut and paste, run of the mill, not very innovative in every Pokemon game. And they took that same amount of effort and stretched it for three really subpar stories that they could do. So the gyms suffer, the gym challenges are terrible, and most of them you don't fight trainers. And they're baffling, like the one with the olive or the one where you just press random buttons for like 3 minutes. That was like offensively bad.
The
And
one where it's like, oh, you gotta figure out the secret menu, walk around and talk to people and figure out what the secret menu is. That one's terrible.
that was terrible. That's the one that I liked. I thought that was the only decent one because it had battling and it had a puzzle. The other ones are missing something. They either have some battles before the gym leader, like the offensively racist double battle gym leader. Do you remember the rapping grandma one?
Yeah.
So that one had battles, but was otherwise pretty terrible. Though I mean, double battles, that was something at least. That'd probably be on the upper end of them. And then again, some of the really bad ones, like again the aforementioned olive puzzle, the sunflora puzzle, where the sunfloras were at like they were going like 5 frames a second. It was so bad.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
God.
So the perform. Maybe we should jump over to the performance for a second. We knew the game ran bad. We knew the game had like stupid windmills that didn't work and looked ridiculous. But we were not prepared. We were not accurately prepared for just how bad the performance was. The game is constantly. The game is lagging and is underperforming more often than not, which wasn't what I was expecting going into the game. It's almost unplayable. It's very much kind of like how Nekopara borders on being a video game. Scarlet and Violet border on being playable at all in any capacity.
They were on being malware, bro.
Yes. So it's really that. It really comes down to that. The things that are in the game do not have quality allocated to them. They feel very rushed. Again, undercooked or like you said, not even started. Nothing's even been began. And then the performance is crazy. And the picnics thing with me, the picnic issue was that the table would never load in. So I would have to reset the game and the game heavily relies on its sandwich mechanic for doing some of the cool things like shiny hunting or getting eggs for Masuda method hunting and getting certain things to spawn. It's just kind of ridiculous that like a main feature of the game just rarely works.
And the character customization is so dumb.
Yeah.
You can change your clothes, but only your hat and your socks. Oh, thanks.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness I can
Thank
change my
goodness.
socks.
Right, that's literally all you can change is your hat, your bag, your sock, and your shoes. What? And you have to wear a school uniform. You have to. But there's not other versions of school uniforms or colors or like ways to make them unique. Like you have to look like everyone else. This is very terrible.
Yeah, they went very far in the direction of making the game, I guess, overtly like self-insert as a baby, self-insert as like sub 10 years old. People always say, "Oh, you're 10 years old when you start your Pokemon adventure." In this game, it feels like much younger, geared.
Yeah. Were those babies that you see in other Pokemon games where you come across the Pokemon school and they're all like 6?
Mm-hmm.
And then you go and you talk to a lady and she's like, water types are good against fire types.
Yeah, I agree. And the dialogue, especially for those three individual stories, is definitely geared towards that. It's very hand-holdy. It's very boring. It's very Coco Melon-esque. I don't know if that show has dialogue, but you know what I mean. It's very low effort. The Nimona rival, we hated her. Both of us despised her in our playthrough. She was so annoying and just written so like unrealistic.
Yeah.
The writing was really hit you over the head with all of its ideas. It has nothing to say. It's very boring. It's pretty cringy from time to time. And I don't know why the games have to come out like this, really. My main thing is the gameplay and the performance. I don't really get it. Also, on the subject of character customization, there are so many removed or worse features in this game. Of course, very anti-Nuzlocke, this game. They removed the set mode from the game, which is just so weird. So it's always going to prompt you to switch your Pokemon, so that's annoying for hardcore Nuzlocks. They also removed things like turning battle animations off. Why would they do that? Especially in a game with such bad performance, why they wouldn't give you the option to make the game run a little better. That's beyond me. They removed character customization, basically. As far as I'm concerned, they removed the feature in this game. And they removed little things. They removed, like, TMs being infinite use, which has been a thing since Gen 5. They removed being able to use, like, multiple potions or multiple healing items and revives at once in the bag. Just really stupid things. Just a lot of things that just were quality of life. They've been in the series for forever, and they're just gone now. I don't get it. The only thing for me that kept the game from us having to make a new tier and put it in F tier was just that I did want a shiny hunt, and that worked for the most part. That was the one thing that we could get to work consistently, and I think almost to a degree it trivializes shiny hunting. I think they should probably expand that feature. They won't. That's silly to say. I think they should add more shiny variants, more harder to get variants to freshen that mechanic that people love, since now it's very easy to get like a shiny living dex with time and patience. You're pretty much guaranteed to knock it out. But yeah.
Okay, next.
Okay, next. Yeah, we don't need to focus on, but that might be our low point for the tier list. Next, we have Hi-Fi Rush. So this one was an incredibly popular title, I think, last year when it came out. This year it came to PS5, so that's how I decided to finally get around to playing it. It's fun. I don't think it's a masterpiece or anything. I think it's got really a great art style. It's got great vibes. I really struggled with getting on the beat for the rhythm, because it's a sort of rhythm action game sort of deal going on. I had a hard time with that. It's certainly a good game. If you can master it, I bet you'd rank it much higher. I had a hard time with it, though, so I'm gonna put it, I would say, high B rank. I'm trying to get it into the high B rank. There we go. So high B rank. It's a lot of fun. It's got some cool characters. I like the robot that draws his expressions on his face, and everyone's just very likable. It's a pretty quick game. It doesn't, overstay its welcome, which is nice as well. Now, it's kind of been a while. We have our next game of the year, and this one is a pretty solid one. It is, of course, Stellar Blade, another action game that, in this case, launched on PS5 and had a lot of hype surrounding it just because it's very high quality graphically. It's got very flashy animations in its combat, and it's very fun. I do feel the need to talk about the comparisons to Nier Automata. This game's been getting a lot of comparisons to that because they do have very similar story beats as far as the themes that they tackle about life and death and the meaning of everything. Very similar. Stellar Blade maybe even hits you over head even more with it. Main character is Eve and main male character is Adam. It's
Yeah, they both do that. They both use the Bible.
Yeah, definitely. And I've heard debate online that Stellar Blade, Nier Automata fans are less keen on it because it's so derivative. But I think the main thing that makes a difference for me, and why you could already see sort of where I'm floating it around, is that combat. The combat in this game is so much fun. It's basically a sort of middle ground between Souls-like combat. It's got your limited healing items. It's got your dodge rolls, your parries, your staggers that are in Souls and other games like Lies of P and stuff like that. While also sort of being flashier, sort of Devil May Cry, Yakuza, the character action, in quotes, genre appeal. And it doesn't bring as much challenge as, again, something like Souls, but it's a very good gateway to sort of that kind of exploration and the way that you engage with enemies in combat. Again, a lot more forgiving, so I'm not saying it's quite there, but it's a very fun game. It's also got great exploration and character customization. You unlock so many outfits throughout the game as rewards for side quests and just for exploring the open worlds. It keeps things very dynamic as well. You've got sort of Souls-styled levels where it's a linear level with shortcuts. You've got sort of open world levels akin to like Elden Ring sort of deal there. And then you have also broken up throughout the game, there's two sort of like third person shooter segments that honestly were a ton of fun. They had great atmosphere. They were kind of meant to be a little bit spookier. They have like some little scares in them and just good vibes all around. And the story and characters, I would say, are almost as bland as Nier Automata. So I'm not saying this is like some storytelling masterpiece or anything. I'd say they're pretty close. I would say personally I like Eve better than 2B, maybe just because she's not, shutting everybody down and being kind of a big downer, and she has a lot of personality again in the combat and in collecting the soda cans and stuff like that. So it really resonated with me. I did do 2 playthroughs of the game. I got the platinum trophy. It was a lot of fun. The upgrade tree gives you a lot of good stuff to work with. And you've got things like double jumping in the game and air combos and little things like that. So all in all, it's very fun and great soundtrack. We loved a lot of the songs in this game. One of the final tracks, like the final versus a character song, was very goofy and fun, if you remember what I'm talking about a little bit.
Yeah.
And again, the character customization, getting like different hairstyles and accessories and outfits, just made it all kind of fun. It was kind of a little light dress up game for a little bit there.
Yeah, and
so
I remember you kept letting me pick her clothes.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, lots of fun, and I'm excited to see what the future of this series is. If there's going to be more of these games, I think it definitely deserves it. I would put it sort of, I'm putting it in high S tier. I'm saying that I like this game a hell of a lot. It was really good. We have another game that came out this year, the newest title in the Neptunia series, this being another spin-off, Neptunia Game Maker Re-Evolution or Revolution. It's sort of hard to tell what they were going for with the title because they put a colon between the R and the E in Revolution, so not 100% sure what the pronunciation is on that. This game is fine. It's your typical Neptunia spin-off affair. I always get a little bit more out of these games than I think most people do, because whatever thing Neptunia is churning out in the franchise, there's always going to be some good commentary on the games industry. Look at last year's title, Sisters vs. Sisters. That was obviously a big game about the phone gaming industry and market and how it impacts console gaming and handheld gaming. The year before, I think, was the one that had the Senran Kagura crossover that fans really disliked, but it did have a story about the importance of competition in video game development. Having competitors that are pushing each other to strive more. And this game is no different. This game is focused heavily on video game development, like going all in on that, and going in on early video game companies like Atari and some other ones. I don't remember the other ones. It's fine. It's a fine little game. I'd say it's low B rank. It's fine. Gameplay-wise, it's an improvement over the Sisters versus Sisters combat. It's sort of an evolution of that. But all in all, I think if you really like game developers making sort of meta commentaries on the industry, with it being painted over with a bunch of cute anime girls, then, Neptunia is a franchise that you might be interested in. This one is just a fine entry. It's not bad. It's not especially great either. Next up, we have Rogue Legacy 2. I've been wanting to get around to this one for a long time. It's an indie game. It's a roguelite where when you die, you continue the story, rather, with your descendant. So it's very cool in that aspect. It's got a good vibe. It's a 2D Metroidvania type roguelike where you explore a castle. I love these games. Just like with Spelunky 2 from a few years ago, Rogue Legacy 2 is like a perfect sequel where they knew everything that people loved about the first game, and it's just more of it with new features. You've got tons of new moves that you unlock during this game, like dashes and the little parry hop thing that you get at the start. And just exploring the castle, going and fighting the bosses. Every run, of course, is very rewarding because unlike some other roguelikes, like Spelunky again, for example, or Balatro, you do carry over certain things into your new playthroughs, like the money you get from your run can be spent to upgrade your castle, which impacts your stats in certain things, and you can also buy certain little upgrades. And every run is just very rewarding to experiment with. You never feel frustrated really by your descendants' traits, because everywhere they can have little traits. That change up the gameplay. It's just a ton of fun. And the one thing that I would say this game definitely does better than the original is its level biomes. Every zone in this game has a boss associated with it, and they have their own gimmicks that make it very fun to traverse it. Some levels are vertical, some are horizontal, some you have to explore around and get certain things to unlock things. It's just a lot of fun. Again, story's not a major focus with this one. There is a little bit of a narrative here, but it's sort of just whatever. You know, it's just fun. It's just fun all around. If you like Metroidvanias, I would give this a try, even if you're not a big fan of roguelikes, because again, there is a progression to it. You do feel like you're making progress, even though you're dying all the time, and you might even have a run that just you totally screw it up. You know.
I also thought it looked very cute.
Mm-hmm. And then we have a game that you're very familiar with. You and I both played this game this year. We have Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, and you can see from my icon here, I have the GameCube version because I did not play the 2024 remaster or remake that came out this year. I played the original game because you and I did a sort of race of sorts when the game came out. You played the new Switch version because you, of course, are a huge fan of the original game. You played it when you were a kid. You replayed it several years ago, and I got to see sort of what it was all about. And this year, I finally got to play it. But of course, again, I played the original version while you played the new version. And we sort of raced to see who could beat it faster. And it was a ton of fun. We didn't take it super seriously, obviously, but it is an amazing game. You weren't kidding when you gave this game high praise. I think it was almost your game of the year a few years ago when you played it fully all the way through and finally beat it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like everything about the game is just really, really good. And the combat, the story, the characters. It's another one of those games where you play and you feel like you are a part of the story, not just watching it.
Absolutely. And I love the game structure. Of course, it has its sort of arcs that you go through. Each chapter is sort of its own self-contained mini story, and they're all good. There are no misses. And the combat is very flexible, very versatile. I love how you and I both sort of were taking our parties in different directions. I, of course, am a huge Goombella fan. You are not so much a fan of Goombella, but getting to diversify your party a little bit, upgrade different people, and then sort of using the badges, customize your Mario to achieve sort of different things, whether that be the moves that you use or prioritizing really boosting your damage or your health. There's just so much customization that if I played the game again right now, I could have a completely different experience as far as my objectives in combat.
It also just looks really good, like style-wise. It looks really good.
Yes, the game holds up really well. I will say the difference between yours and I's experience this year was the translation. I definitely preferred my translation over yours. I feel like yours watered down some things that like took some jokes out that I thought were funny in the original, which was weird. But overall, the story is maintained. It's a very high quality story. I like the overarching story as well as the individual little arcs that you go through, and the mystery on the train and everything to do with.
That's my favorite level.
Mm-hmm. I love is it the Glitz Pit? I don't remember the name of the arena, but I love that chapter a lot. I also like how you could get your own, you could sort of
Yoshi.
Yeah, get your own Yoshi. You name him, and you can, by messing around a little bit, you can get different colors. I mean, it's just so cool. They thought of a ton of little things to make the game so much fun. I really want to go back. Neither of us have played the original Paper Mario that features the same gameplay, I think, for the most part, as this one. And it's on Nintendo Switch Online, so we should really go back and try that game out because it's probably just as fun as this one.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously this is definitely S tier. I mean, this was great. I was sleeping on it when you played it a couple years ago. For me, I was like, it seems kind of cool. I fell asleep during parts of it. I was definitely not in the right headspace. Now I get it.
I'm actually shocked. We haven't talked about the top 10 list at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm actually shocked that you put it so high because I didn't think that you would. I didn't think you would put it S tier. I thought you would put it B tier.
Gotcha. And I was wondering about if you were going to mention any little hints about where your list was going. Well, I don't know what to tell you about this one. You were right on the money with this
Yeah.
game. You were right on the money. This is an excellent title. This is one of my favorite. I don't know if I'd say it's one of my favorite RPGs I've ever played, but it's definitely one of my favorite. It might be my favorite Mario game that I've ever played. I'm not a huge
Yeah.
Mario fan. I think most Mario games are good. I think this is probably the best one I've ever played. I liked it a lot. We have another game here. Moving on from that, we have another game here that came out this year, and this was another one that's just okay. I'm kind of leaning sort of back end to B tier for it. It's Penny's Big Breakaway, which was sort of getting some attention at Nintendo Directs. It's developed by the same team that worked on Sonic Mania, which was big for that franchise, obviously. And it's a lot of fun. It's high speed 3D platforming action. The reason it didn't rank so high for me is just because it kind of came and went. I played through the whole game. It's got a little cute little story that doesn't really clock out with much consequence there. It's kind of just whatever, um, and it's got very good movement. We have another game come up, another indie game actually that has really good 3D movement. This game is similar. It's definitely something that you want to spend time mastering. I didn't feel compelled to do so because it's really your only reward is, achieving like a high score at the end. And the levels are sort of unintuitive because, sort of like your average 3D Sonic level, you want to get through the level as fast as possible and do cool tricks and skips to get through it in time, which is cool. But then the levels have like little side missions that don't fit that style of gameplay at all and have you backtrack and do things, and it just kind of didn't flow all that well. And it being a new IP, it didn't really stand out as like I want to sit down and try to master this gameplay system just for the bragging rights of it. There isn't a huge incentive to really taking it to the extreme. So it's a good game. And again, I could see someone who really does take to its systems and its movement and wants to push it all the way. They could end up ranking it very high, but it wasn't really for me. It just didn't resonate with me. It didn't inspire a lot of creativity in me in that aspect. And then next up we have Hypnospace Outlaw. So this one was one that you and I were both really interested in. We saw a video about, not really going into the story. I didn't think this game really had a story of any kind, just sort of showing that it's sort of a web browser. What was that?
Sorry. Well, kind of had a story.
No, I'm saying we didn't know it was going to have a story.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Right, I didn't realize, or at least I didn't. I thought it was just a goofy little game where you explore this sort of commentary on what early internet was like, and that was really appealing. It looked very detailed and like it had a lot of secrets to uncover. The game actually did end up having a pretty emotional story that spans over, I think it was a few months or so, and sort of, I wanted to look at those two halves separately. So the side that is parody, that is this sort of time capsule-esque experience of exploring a simulation of what 90s internet could feel like. It's tons of fun. Like we sort of suspected, there was a ton of detail, a lot of secret pages, things to look out for. The premise of the game is that you're an administrator for this this prototype overnight internet experience where you plug your mind in while you go to sleep, and you get to explore web pages, and it's very 90s inspired with how creative people have got with their pages, but also how goofy and low quality everything looks. And it's just a ton of fun. That was my favorite part of the game, especially those early hours, was exploring all the different zones that you can go to that all have a surplus of pages, both just individuals pages that are like about them and companies pages like the soda brand with their theme songs, and everything is so goofy and fun. And then you have
They put
this
so much effort into it.
right, and there's just so much to discover that has nothing to do with anything, you know. So it just feels rich. It feels rich with content. But on the other hand, you sort of have this story that progresses throughout about the company that you're working for, and it gets a little heavy kind of there the end, with some pretty serious things going on. And to not spoil it, because I think you should definitely experience it, I did like the sort of emotional narrative that the game takes towards its latter half, but I do think it kind of comes in conflict with the fun that I had, you know? Like the
Mhm.
game's commentary on this company and what ends up happening in the climax of the story kind of undermines or makes me feel bad a little bit about how much fun I was having with the game up to that point. It's one of those types of things where it kind of makes you put things in perspective, and maybe it wasn't all fun in games. So it's still a great
Yeah.
time. I'm leaning like high B, low
I
A.
can't believe you're putting it so low.
I don't know. I mean, again, I think it's really cool. I think as an art piece, S tier. As a video game and as an experience, it has a lot to offer, but it's not, it's not the most. It's not like
Gotcha.
the greatest thing. I'm thinking maybe low A
Well,
tier. I'm gonna put it in low A tier for now. We're gonna see. I mean, some of these things are subject to change, so we'll have to see. Where
yeah.
sort of things are going. We have another. I keep saying another, like they are back to back. They haven't really been, but we have another 2024 releases, Persona 3 Reload. Um, and this one was just kind of okay. This is
I
kind
feel
of.
like it was the least interesting persona to watch you play.
I know, and I feel bad saying that. I feel like the obvious argument to me saying, well, I played Persona 4 and I loved it, and I played Persona 5 and I liked it, and then I played Persona 3, which obviously, in the context of 3, 4, 5, obviously it came out first. So some people say, well, it's not fair to hold it to the standards of 4 and 5, but it's a remake. It probably should have, tried to. I don't know.
Remake it though.
Right? It should have. I don't know.
And I feel like it had a lot on its side with the kind of the 2008 nostalgia with the phone and the clothes and everything. I feel like a lot of that could have been on its side used properly, but they just didn't. And I just felt like I didn't like a lot of the like what do you call the people that you hang out with?
I guess the social links.
Yeah. I didn't really like any of the social links for real.
Right. I didn't.
Like,
I didn't resonate with anyone like I resonated with 4, and even a couple of 5 characters. It
right.
now you and I have not played the original 3 or 3 Portable. I would like to play those someday, but from what I have gathered from people talking about it on the internet, and this isn't my opinion, so I'm not really basing it off of. It seems like though this game is sort of, it doesn't know what it wants to be. It doesn't. It's not super faithful to the vibes of the original because it wants to like get that Persona 5 money, but it also doesn't
Yeah.
it doesn't fully go into that camp either. It's sort of this weird middle ground where it's being pulled at from two sides. Like someone wanted it to be very Persona 5 like, and someone wanted it to stay closer to 3 and its vibes, and it ends up not being either. Again, I can just tell you that to me it's my least favorite of the Persona games that I've played. I prefer Tactica to this. I thought Tactica had a better emotional sort of through line, and I like the gameplay better. This game is still fine. It's a lot of fun. I think it's a low B, maybe even a high C, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like with you, the characters didn't really resonate with me. It felt like a lot of whiplash. A lot of what I would consider to be Persona staples weren't really in this game. This game isn't very character driven. Like I don't think like okay. Because again, I don't want to be like, I'm like, well, I just want Persona 5 again. I just give me my Persona 5 slop. But in Persona 4 and 5, they make a big deal about like a Persona awakenings, and the characters all have big moments. Like in Persona 4, all the dungeon bosses are your party members, and they have to accept some hard truth about themselves. And in Persona 5, everyone has their awakening where they summon their persona by like ripping off the mask. And
Yeah.
by comparison, I mean, most of the characters in this game, they just like, you get told in an unvoiced dialogue scene that, oh, I have a persona, so I'm coming to join you as a party member. There's like one point in the game where I got 3 party members at once. They just all walked up to me, and maybe it was on different days, but it was in between dungeon exploring, and they were like, hey, it turns out I have a persona, so I'll be joining you in the dungeon soon. And I'm like, what's going on? I don't even know you people, and I don't care about you people. And then they try to do an emotional story where a character gets killed off, and I was just like, I don't really know that guy. So it
Yeah.
just didn't seem set up and really paid off. The game's overall story as well. Like in Persona 5, it's like all about stopping the evil adults that are doing things that are messing with us. And in Persona 4, it's about uncovering the mystery of what's going on in Inaba. And in this game, it's just like every month you go and you fight boss, and there's no
Isn't
story.
it like, or the world is gonna end or something? I don't know.
I don't even think they don't know that until the end.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's like a last act
Last.
twist.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, the world is going to end. Are we going to do something about it or not? But that has nothing to do with anything that's going on in before. It's kind of, I guess
Which
you could,
also kind of makes it like kind of boring.
right. It's just kind of boring. Like there isn't any big interesting story moments up until again they try to do something with a character death, but that doesn't really hit either. So, yeah, I feel bad saying that it doesn't live up to its later entries, but this is a remake and maybe they should have tried to do better. I don't know. I think I'll put it below Nier Automata. I'd rather play Nier Automata than replay Persona 3 Reload. Partially because Persona 3 Reload's like 1,000,000 hours long and Nier Automata can be run through in like 20 hours or less, but this is where I'm feeling for it. Do you think that's too harsh?
No.
Okay. These next few are going to be easy. We have some indie games and some old games to sort of quickly jump through. We have Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island. This game, I just kind of played it randomly. I always had the Game Boy version of the game, never could beat it as a kid, and it was on Nintendo Switch Online, so I went ahead and got it, or I went ahead and, booted it up and played through it, and it's pretty charming. It's a ton of fun. I don't know if it's an A tier. I'd probably put it, maybe right here. It's fine. It's fun. It's got a very cute art style. It's very forgiving. I like Baby Mario and playing with Yoshi, and the music is charming. It just doesn't inspire a lot in me. So,
Yeah.
it's good. It's good. No harm in that. Next, we have another indie game. This year was a big year for indie games for me. I've kind of been slacking on my indies in previous years, so then I played a ton this year, and I felt kind of bad about it because usually they're quicker. So it kind of felt like I was padding the list, but we have Sayonara Wild Hearts. This is very quick. This is like you could knock this out in an afternoon. I didn't. I did, kind of gradually make my way through over the course of several little play sessions, and I did spend some time trying to get high scores. But it's a very musically inclined game. It's got some great songs in it. They're sort of like runner games. It's sort of hard for me to nail down what genre this is, but it's a lot of fun. I would put it around here, low B tier. It's a good game. Probably like it better than Penny's Big Breakaway. It just doesn't have a lot to it. We have another indie game, Demon Turf. This was one that just it was on sale and I wanted to check it out. It looked pretty cool. Similar to Penny's Big Breakaway, it's got really good movement tech where you've got a lot of cool tricks and skips that you can do. But it's not speed focused, so it doesn't really have that sort of impacting it, good or bad. It's just a little cute game where you play as a demon, little demon girl, and platform through some levels. It's got a story about taking over hell. But it mostly is just played for laughs. It's very lighthearted and fun. And the later levels definitely inspire a lot of complexity in the platforming. And there's like challenge levels that I couldn't like do any of. So there's a lot here. If you like sort of the Mario Odyssey, Hat in Time movement type stuff, and you want like something really challenging, this might be it. This might be it. Look at the challenge levels in these. Got some cool character customization. I liked having a pet rock the whole game accompany me. That was cool. But yeah, another one where it's just kind of whatever. The story is just a simple thing. It doesn't add or detract anything, and the gameplay again is fun, but it's just a quick indie platformer, like a Hat in Time, but a little bit lesser. Now we have our next Xenoblade game to talk about, Xenoblade Chronicles X. This was another one that I was very excited for. Again, I mentioned before that I had this game on Wii U when it came out, and I couldn't get into it, so I was excited to give it another try with my more formed adult brain and maybe figure out its mechanics this time. One thing I didn't mention before with the Xenoblade games, especially the first two, Xenoblade Chronicles and then Xenoblade Chronicles X, is that the game overwhelms a lot with a lot of annoying design choices that make these games not super inviting. I wouldn't say they're terrible, because it's those things that like where you get used to it, then it's fine, but it's a barrier to entry. So these games have, crazy equipment management where you're getting new equipment drops from enemies all the time, and they have 50 million stats associated with them and effects that aren't explained anywhere in the game. And then you yourself as a character have, like 20 stats to worry about, and you don't really know the difference between attack and power. And you don't know the difference between things like that. And that plagues both of these first two games pretty bad. Not so much the other two Xenoblade games we have to talk about, but all in all, Xenoblade Chronicles X is not a terrible game. Its production value, we haven't talked about that either, of course, being on Nintendo. All 4 Xenoblade Chronicles games, maybe not 3, but definitely these first 2, have about the production value of a PS2 game, like an early PS2 game. Especially Xenoblade Chronicles X. This game is a lot of just all the chapters start off with standard dialogue scenes where all the character models are around, and there's not much production value as far as that goes. This one definitely owns its open world more than any of the other games in the series. You have a lot more movement options. You have flying vehicles called, I think they're called Skells. I can't really remember if they're called Skells or Blades, or I think maybe I'm a Blade. The character you play as is called a Blade, and you drive a Skell. It's kind of hard to remember. Some of these games interuse their terms, like as references to one another, because Blades is a term in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Obviously, that means something completely different, so whatever, I don't know. But you can also jump really high in these games. You move really fast, so it feels really good to run around the open world in this game. But the story is a lot lesser. It has no connection almost to Xenoblade Chronicles and even the other sequels, the numbered games. But you do have a little bit more freedom with your classes in this game, as you can sort of pick what your own character. Your character is like an insert character this time instead of being a person, like a character with a voice and a narrative to go along with them. So it's got its pros and cons. It kind of just floats around, same quality. The big issues for me with the game is that it's overcomplicated with annoying stuff to do, like really, really boring side quests and map management. Like there's like territory things and crafting and mining, and it just felt like too much. And the game, just like all the other ones, is incredibly long and doesn't own its runtime. The gameplay, even with the different classes and with using those vehicles in combat, which you can do as well later in the game, it just doesn't justify its runtime. Story-wise, it doesn't. Gameplay, it doesn't. It's the big issue with this franchise. They always become slogs by the end, and you're just dying for them to end. So I don't know. I'm trying to think about if this is better or worse than the first one. It's just different in a lot of ways. Of course, my biggest problem with the game has to do, story-wise, probably with the ending. The game leaves a ton of questions unanswered, like sequel baiting, and then it didn't get a sequel. And while the game did get, of course, after I beat it on Wii U, it got announced that it's getting a port to Switch with new story content. Just like what happened with Ishin a few years ago, where I sat through Ishin with a translation guide, and then its localization got announced like a month later. It was ridiculous. But that's great. I'm not going to play it. I don't care if it answers all the questions about why everyone could understand each other or why everyone should be dead and they're not. It's whatever. It was annoying. It's annoying that the game ended that way with a whole bunch of twists that are never going to get followed up on. And if they do, then whatever. It's still annoying that this game did it. And I did not like Elma's character by the end. The main female lead, Elma, the twist regarding her real nature and her body being preserved while nobody else's was, it's all just very disturbing. And sort of sours her character at the end in some big ways, and she's fake out representation. Well, we'll just say it. She faked out as representation, so I don't know. I'm feeling it's a little lesser than the first one. I'll put it above some of these indie games that were just kind of whatever, but I'll put it below the Neptunia game, which is an insult, I'm sure, in some people's minds. So at least there's that. We have a bunch of quick ones we can knock out now. We have Tearaway, which you didn't get to see this one really at all because it was a Vita game. I did play the original Vita version, even though it has a enhanced PS4 version with new content. Though I've heard mixed things. Apparently the PS4 version's content is kind of like, it doesn't, it adds to the runtime, but it's padding. So that's interesting. The game is cute. It does, I'm sorry, PS Vita, to say this so late in your life cycle, but it did use your features to their fullest extent. The front, back touchscreens and the camera and everything. That's great. But I think the biggest problem is that the game is not that interesting. It's cute, and that means it's good. It's a good little cute game. It doesn't have any problems. It's got some fun puzzles. It kind of just falls in our B category somewhere. I'd say probably maybe sort of in the same place we've been placing some of these other games that are shorter. With some of these games that don't have I don't have huge opinions on. I don't have big feelings, one could
Well,
say,
some things
to
are like
express.
okay to be average.
Right, and it's just a little above average. So I don't know. I'd say it's above, right here. Not super inspired. We have SSX3, which I got to play via the Xbox Series X's backwards compatibility, so that was cool. That was one of the first games I got to play that way. It's the first Xbox original, if that's what people call it. The original Xbox. My first original Xbox game, because I've never grown up with Xbox, but with the backwards compatibility, I've started to pick up games from that line, and it's pretty cool. SSX, it appealed to me. It's an extreme sports game with a focus on arcade-like point mechanics, similar to Tony Hawk and Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. I think it's a little better than Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. Again, it's got a little bit higher of a skill ceiling and a little bit more interesting stuff going on. It's got some great vibes with its sort of reality or sports show presentation that I liked a lot.
I like the radio.
Yeah, it's got good music, and all the levels look great, especially any level at nighttime. Looks amazing.
Yeah.
Holds up very well. I would say...
And it had some decent customization.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And you unlock more stuff as you go through the game, and a lot of cool characters, and you can upgrade their stats. So, it's a lot of fun. I could definitely see myself popping it back in. I probably put this high B rank. Top of B rank for now.
Nice.
Again, I wouldn't say this is better than any Tony Hawk game, though. I've basically beaten all the Tony Hawk games, so every year I try to find something somewhere. I grasp for something in that likeness, and I get, above average most of the time, but nothing quite at that underground level, at that 1 and 2 remake that came out a couple years ago. I keep hoping we'll get more. I guess we'll see. Next up, we have Borderlands, the pre-sequel. This is easily a low B tier. I don't know why I keep playing these games. I don't know what compels me.
I don't like to watch you play those games because I don't like how it looks. I think all the characters are ugly. I think the art style is ugly. I think the world is ugly. I think the plot is really, really boring. And every time you play it, I try to be like, okay, I'm gonna sit down for real and I'm gonna watch you play this so I can get like what is Borderlands. And every time, like within 10 minutes, I just like, oh, I don't care. Like, where's my phone? Because I don't care.
Yeah,
it's so bad.
All of these Borderlands games, the best thing that you can say about the stories in these Borderlands games is that they go in one ear and out the other. Because when they don't, like with Borderlands 3 and Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, which I played a couple years ago, those games stick in the memory for all the bad reasons, for being really unfunny and you being embarrassed. These are games I do not like to play when you're home because the dialogue embarrasses me, and I don't want you to think. I don't want you to think that I'm laughing at anything that's being said in these games. I don't know if other people have that experience. If they play a game, but it's a negative experience for them because another person might think that they like what's happening in the game. So yes, it's probably more C tier. The reason I was leaning low B is because this one is not as bad as those other two that I played. It's sort of between the first two games, which I don't remember hardly anything from because they were just in one ear and out the other. They weren't offensive, but they weren't particularly interesting. These games have a lot of lore to them, from what I understand. People really are interested in them. Every time that I think about Borderlands, I can't think of anything, and then I'll watch a video to try to refresh myself on what they're about, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I remember that happening. That did happen, didn't it? And then it's just whatever, it's gone. Now, in fairness to Borderlands, I am not playing these games correctly, because these games, first of all, just like with every Borderlands game, every Borderlands game I played, I've been incredibly behind the times. I got into this series way late. It was one of my franchise themes a previous year. Just for fun, it was one of my sub-themes. And I'm not playing it as intended, because you're supposed to play these games with like 4 friends on Discord or Skype back in the day. And, have a hoot and holler in time, because multiplayer makes any game better. And I'm playing them as single-player first-person shooter RPGs, like a Fallout game. And it's really... that is not the best way to play these games. You're not getting the most out of them. I think they should still function as single-player games if you'd like to play them that way, and they still do, gameplay-wise. I think Borderlands, the worst thing I can say about the gameplay is that, your enjoyment is determined by the loot you get. It's a looter-shooter where you're just getting randomly dealt stuff, and similar to what I was saying about Xenoblade, there's a lot of stats in these games that aren't, self-explanatory and kind of make things harder to understand. You've got different weapon types, and they've all got different stats and different firing speeds and different bonus effects, and it just makes it go like, ugh, like my eyes just glaze over all the stupid things that a gun can do. I mean, Borderlands 3, as much as I hated that game's story, I got a really stupid weapon drop in that game, and it made the gameplay really fun because I was just shooting a small little miniature sun at all the enemies that just one-shot everybody, and that made the game fun. I didn't have anything crazy like that happen in really any of the other games, gameplay-wise. It's just kind of whatever. I would actually say I'd probably put this below Persona 3 Reload, but above Sonic Generations. It's a C. This one is fine. Handsome Jack is in this game, which I know people like him. I think he's fine. He's a better villain than the one from 3. Or the ones from 3.
He wasn't very handsome.
Yeah. So...
Next.
Little weird, but whatever. It's Borderlands. Final Fantasy rep for this year. Just sort of randomly wanted to play Final Fantasy VIII, and it's pretty good. I like Final Fantasy VIII. It's my favorite of the PS1 trilogy of Final Fantasy games. Granted, I have not yet played 9. That's your speed. You obviously love 9. And I played 7 and just kind of thought it was okay. But that's probably, again, because I didn't play it when it came out. That's, my own fault. I take accountability for not playing games when relevant and then not getting them when I'm 20 years behind. But Final Fantasy VIII was a lot of fun. I think it had a lot of high production value scenes. I think it looked very good. Its CG cutscenes held up really well. I think the combat was a lot of fun. I think a lot of people, it's very hit or miss with the draw system, drawing magic and then equipping it. I had a lot of fun with it. But I like grinding in games. I don't mind grinding out a game and then being able to have 100 of a magic and do crazy stuff with it or boost my stats. It was a lot of fun. And I think the world is very good. This is the PS1 Final Fantasy that I like the most. It's good. And I think the romance is good between Squall and the girl, Riona. It took me a second to remember her. Right. And I like the other party members. I liked Selphie and Quistis and the cowboy. I don't remember the cowboy's name. His name... Well, And Zell. I remembered Zell's name. It's a good party. And I like the story. I like the Balam storyline. I've always wanted to play Final Fantasy VIII because of Kingdom Hearts, because the character of Squall is in Kingdom Hearts, and he's sort of maybe the most prominent Final Fantasy character in that series, which is really weird now having played 8, because he really does not seem like the pick to be like the Final Fantasy big representative in another franchise. So that's interesting, but I like his character a lot. I've always been drawn to him because he always seems so cool and mysterious in Kingdom Hearts. So finally getting to play his game, I had a lot of fun. So it's a low A tier for me. It's not my favorite Final Fantasy game, not even close. It's probably right in the middle of my Final Fantasy games. I don't like it as much as 10 or the Tactics games or the 13 trilogy, which is controversial, I'm sure. But I like it more than 7 and the 7 remake and probably 12. I mean, I like 12 a lot, so I don't know. It's, but I like it more than 15 for sure, and like the spin-offs that I played that were bad. So it's the middle, but Final Fantasy is always a good time, and it was great to knock out another one of those. Next, we have another very popular game that came out this year. We have Astrobot, and this one's another one that I'm just gonna plop it way high up.
Oh my god.
What?
I did not think you would put that high.
It was a good time.
I thought that's crazy. Dang, I did not think. That blindsided me. And I was thinking about it, like I was debating it, but I was like, no, like, I don't know. That's crazy.
I'm really interested to hear what you predicted my top 10 would be. But Astrobot is a ton of fun. This game, I mean, it's sort of... I'm trying to think of how best to explain it, because it is a game where it just, everything about it works, and it works really well.
Yeah.
It's not, it obviously doesn't have a story, really. It doesn't inspire, complex thought like some of the other Well, now that I'm looking at my S rank, this year my S rank is not pointing at high concept ideas. I mostly put all that shit way lower down. So actually, I'm making myself look pretty bad with some of my picks here not being story related when I do value story quite a bit in games. I guess this year all the story games just didn't hit with me
Do you?
personally. I guess not. I don't know. I don't know, but Astrobot, I really liked the Astro's Playroom, the free tech demo thing that everyone got with their PS5. I enjoyed that when I got my PS5, and this is a full-sized version of that. It's great platforming action. It's got a lot of fun gimmicks, kind of like a 3D version of Mario Wonder. Levels have their gimmicks, and they have very good visual design in Astrobot. And of course, like many people, I was drawn to the PlayStation references. I'm a PlayStation person. I grew up with PlayStation. You could probably tell by me trying to include the boxes of all the games that PlayStation is the console that I currently play on, and it's the one that I grew up on. And there were tons of awesome references in the game. I do think that I am not so easily manipulated as to say that the little character references made the game for me, but I do think the level references were really fun. I think if they do another one of these games, I have to imagine they are, since it's such a critically acclaimed game. It won Game of the Year at the TGAs. I assume they're going to make another one of these. I would really prefer it if they focused less on just having the collectible characters references and focus more on level references, like the Ape Escape level. You and I were very excited by that. You love Ape Escape 3. I do as well. We love Ape Escape. There was that Loco Roco level, the Uncharted level, God of War. I think they should focus on that. They should do a game where they should give them a bigger budget and just every level is a reference to a game, and they take their mechanics from that. That would be great. But as it is, Astrobot is just tons of fun. It's got great music. It's got great platforming. All of its gimmicks are fun to mess around with. It's got fun little challenges that there are times where the game gets a little challenging, and that's cool. I don't think the game gets crazy with it. I think it could go further with its challenge in a future game, kind of like Mario Wonder did with its 2D challenges that did sometimes get also a little crazy. So I'm actually seeing a lot of parallels between these two as far as 3D and 2D, but of course I'm a 3D person. I love 3D platforming, and the game was just a ton of fun. Maybe it's not above Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to, over rely on nostalgia. I'm gonna keep it above Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. But
And I was like, oh, like, you're gonna be like, that's kind of just nostalgia bait. Like, obviously I would like it a lot because nostalgia bait, and that would make you put it lower. But maybe I was judging too much on my own criteria without realizing
you were thinking a bit too highly of me. So I do apologize. I did fall for I did indeed fall for this one. But you can be nostalgia baity if your game is still good. There was also a ton of good customization. We liked the costumes, and we liked the ship customizations. All that stuff was good. And we liked, I fell for it.
Yeah, I don't think it's undeserving. I was not expecting that.
I know.
Bless you.
But I was going to say I fell for it in the sense that, I liked seeing things like all the characters' little animations in the hub, like Kiryu having all those items fall out of him, and Dante, juggling someone with Ebony and Ivory as pistols, and Mr. Mosquito. I mean, how blown away I was by the Mr. Mosquito reference, and then like a month later, it gets ported to PS5, which just blows my mind. I'm so excited about getting to go back to that at some point. But yeah, it was just a lot of fun. I think I don't think it deserved to win Game of the Year. I think that some other games felt justifiably snubbed at the Game Awards, but hey, I played it, and I thought it was pretty good. It was a stacked year, what can I say? But we have a few more we can knock out pretty quickly. First we have Persona 3 Dancing, to, of course, accompany Persona 3 Reload. This is a low C. It's not a low C because it's bad. Sort of similar to Nekopara. It's not bad at what it is. It just did what it set out to do, and what it set out to do was just, average. It didn't aspire for more. It has basically no story, and it wants you to play its songs over and over and over again on increasing difficulties, and some of the remixes are great and some of the remixes are terrible. and overall the rhythm game mechanics. I'm not an expert on rhythm games. Even you know a little bit more about rhythm games than me. But I thought they were fine. I thought it was fun. I can't play on the harder difficulties in these games, unfortunately. I'm not that skilled. I'm not ready for the big leagues. But it's fine. And, you know, you and I listen to some of the songs all the time, so we get enjoyment out of that. So it's fine. It's probably better than Sonic Generations on 3DS. But, yeah, that's a fine placement. Next, we have another game that came out this year. We have RZ, which was a cute little throwback to the CDI Zelda games in terms of its art style, but more traditionally and functionally a Metroidvania. And it's a lot of fun. I would probably put this one in the higher B tier, maybe. I would probably say this is our new high B tier. Again, it was very cute. It's very easy. It's very quick, but it's fun. So, you know, whatever. I don't have much to say about it. We have Fossil Fighters Champions next, another handheld title. I did make a point of showing you a lot of this game, so I hope you understood how much
I hate you so much.
I don't know what to tell you. I showed you this
hate
game.
And that's another one where I was like, I didn't want to get baited. I overthought it because I didn't want to get baited into picking something that was too obvious. And I was like, you were saying this game is really great. And you were saying like, oh, you played it like way back when, right? And you liked it a lot. But I was like, it's not going to be top 10 though because like it's not good enough like story-wise and da-da-da. I was wrong.
Yeah, you were wrong. This game, I mean, I made a point to show you the cutscenes in this game. I thought the story was great.
I know, but I didn't think like I don't know. I was overthinking myself way too much.
I told you not to. I told you to just think logically.
And I did it anyways.
So, for context, Fossil Fighters Champions is a game from my childhood that I could never beat. It's like many assume, it's a sort of Pokemon adjacent type thing. It's sort of someone else trying to jump on the craze of Pokemon. Its battles are definitely more complex. Think Pokemon, but if every battle was a triple battle and a rotation battle at the same time. And that meant things. If you don't know what those mean, then whatever. It just means it's a little complex, and it has some ideas. It does exchange type matchup complexity, because there's only 4 types or 5 types in the game. But Fossil Fighters is a ton of fun. You mine fossils out in various dig sites. You take them back, you blow on the screen to clean them and stuff, and you use hammers and drills to try to get them out as clean as possible, and then you turn them into Vivosaurs for battle. And that is a take on the Pokemon formula that I think really works. I think you really get a lot of fun out of the mining and restoration of your fossils, way more than you get out of like catching a hard to catch Pokemon. That's pretty mindless. That's probably why you don't like things like Legends Arceus or even Scarlet and Violet, because you don't get a lot of pleasure. You don't feel like there's a lot going on when it comes to just catching a bunch of Pokemon. But reviving a Vivosaur, that takes effort, and it's very engaging. I could say that by the end of a long RPG, you might not be having a ton of fun cleaning fossil after fossil, but you can, automate that to some extent in all these games. And then the story of Fossil Fighters Champions, I don't know if I'd say it's anything to write home about. It sort of borders on that. I feel like possibly nostalgia-driven. It has a lot of great moments. It's got a very good story with, again, twists and turns. It surprises you, sort of in the same vein as Mystery Dungeon. You go in with low expectations, and you'll be surprised by just how much there is going on there. It's got some great cutscenes. I like it a lot. I think this is a great game. It's one of my favorite DS games for sure. So I'm surprised you did not guess that it should be in the top 10. Again, I'm very interested to hear what you have picked at the end. We're getting pretty close.
Yeah.
Next up, this is another quick one. We have 2008's Prince of Persia, sort of like Fossil Fighters. This is a random one. This is another game from my childhood that I could never beat. And then I popped it in to show you the boss that I could never beat, and I beat it in like 1 second. So it's sort of snowballed from there. But I have not played any Prince of Persia games ever other than this one, and I think it's pretty solid. I'd say it's probably a low A tier. I like the character dynamics between the prince and the girl whose name escapes me.
The animations are really cool.
Yeah, the animations and the graphics are really cool. I think it holds up pretty well. The world is cool. I like the different moves that you use in the environment. And the ending was surprising. You and I were both surprised by the twist ending that sort of took place. There is a DLC expansion of this game that we might play, or I might play at some point, to see a further continuation of the story, because I think otherwise we'll never see anything from it again. But this has definitely inspired me to maybe take a look at the Prince of Persia series as a whole, maybe a little more closely going forward. Of course, that new game came out this year. I didn't play it, so it's not here. And then, but the Sands of Time quadrilogy. I think there's 4 games in that continuity. That could be fun as a franchise theme, or a sub theme for a future year. So I'm keeping my eye on that franchise. Plus, it may even have a revival if that game that came out earlier this year did good. I didn't really keep tabs on it. Obviously, I'm not helping that cause since I didn't buy it, but it's pretty cool. All right, we're in sort of the final stretch here. We're hitting October time frame, so let's try to knock out a few more of these a little bit quicker. Obviously, Sonic X Shadow Generations. I'm particularly ranking the Shadow Generations portion, and this is another pretty highly ranked one. I'd say it probably falls around here in the S ranked tier. And again, I'm talking strictly Shadow Generations. The Shadow Generations portion, obviously, I commented a little bit on in my video talking about the Sonic Generations rewrites, and I, expressed my hype for the game in the Shadow the Hedgehog video. That was my first video, so I'm not going to go in depth on this. What it comes down to is that the game has a very solid story. It's a little derivative of like Shadow the Hedgehog and Sonic Adventure 2, but after all the games we've had to endure in the Sonic series that have had really poor stories and poor writing, it's just very refreshing to get a story that feels grounded and like it has some ideas that that work. Even if they're kind of tired ideas or just rehashing some old ideas for the fun of it. And then the gameplay, it's great. I think the 2D levels I don't like as much as the 3D levels, but they're still good. I still like them a lot. And then the 3D levels are all great. These are some of the best Sonic levels, I'd say, in Boost Sonic history. I really love Radical Highway Act 1, Kingdom Valley Act 1, Space Colony Arc Act 1, Rail Canyon Act 1. The Sunset Heights Act 1 remix is great. I love it. That is probably my favorite remix in the game. Just throwing out some stats on the game, I guess. And the open world, the white space, the 3D white space, genius. Genius interpretation of Sonic Generations' boring 2D white space and turning it into a 3D Sonic Frontiers S-Cup world. Genius. They did great with this one. Honestly, it deserves S tier. I think it's great. It's got some great music. It really, all the things that I wanted from the game. I wanted a good story. I wanted some fun levels that were on the longer side and had multiple pathways, and I got that. And I wanted them to really go crazy on the music, kind of like how, with Sonic Generations, you got all those unlockable songs. I really wanted that to return, and it did. So all of my hopes were answered. It had a good story. That's really all I have to say about it. I don't think I have to go any deeper than that. Next up, we have our other. We're in October still, so we have some Halloween themed games to discuss. We have Pumpkin Jack, which I got sort of as a little joke because I knew it was made by the same people that made a Kimbot, which I wanted to play, and we're going to talk about that next. And so I was like, oh great, we'll knock out 2 games developed by the same people, and one of them is even Halloween themed, so that's great. And the game is a solid B tier. I'd say it probably falls around maybe right under the Neptunia game. Again, mileage will vary on that, but it's fun. It's short. It's a very light action game. It doesn't have any complex mechanics. You basically just hit stuff and do a little bit of weapon switching, but the weapons aren't very complex. It has a goofy little story about being an evil pumpkin man and going to, end humanity, which is fun. And it's got very cool vibes. It was a very fun October game to play. The same cannot be said for a Kimbot. A Kimbot is our other D rank game, other than Pokemon Violet. This surprised me. So this obviously caught my attention. I'm a big Ratchet and Clank fan-ish. I say that because I don't really like the newer games, but I grew up with Ratchet and Clank. It was my favorite franchise growing up. And so to hear that an indie game sort of came out that was inspired by Ratchet and Clank, that grabbed my attention. I was excited to play it. This game is terrible. Do not play this game. This game is so bad. I'm tempted to put it below Pokemon Violet, but Pokemon Violet is so insulting. Where do I even start with this game? So first of all, this game is much longer. This game feels like 10 Xenoblade Chronicles. If you thought me ranting about the length of Xenoblade Chronicles games is like was bad. This game was 10 hours, and it felt like 100 Xenoblade Chronicles playthroughs. The levels in this game are so long. The enemy design, I feel like I'm jumping around. Let's talk about one thing at a time. The story in this game is very whatever. It's very boring. It's just like you're a robot and there's a threat and you got to stop it. I just described the game's plot. The thing that makes the story insufferable is that the game does have a million cutscenes. They're thankfully not as long as your average Xenoblade cutscene, but they are long for like a platformer shooter, and the voice acting is horrendous. These are some of the worst English voice performances I've heard in a long time, and they are incredibly annoying. You've got your Ratchet and Clank wannabes. You've got EXE, who you play as, and then you've got Shipset, who's your little robot companion. And I don't know what they're inspired off of. They're inspired off of whatever the most annoying thing that you can think of is. Shipset is like, gosh, I don't even. I'm trying to think of like a really annoying I guess the annoying orange. Shipset is like the annoying orange, and EXE is like whatever the worst incarnation of Shadow the Hedgehog is. Because
yes,
he's like really edgy, and he's like, oh, I don't want to do this. I'm just trying to get paid. And, bro, tone it down. You're scaring the hoes. He sucks.
trying way too hard.
Right, trying way too hard. And then, like I said, Shipset is like the annoying orange. He's like making unfunny jokes and laughing obnoxiously the whole game. So about halfway through the game, I switched the language to French. It was my only option, and it was my saving grace for like the whole middle part of the game, because then I could just ignore the dialogue and just play. But the game itself is very bad, unfortunately. So this game is sort of like utilizing faux Ratchet and Clank mechanics, where it's like a third-person strafe shooter, but the enemies are all using like Uncharted enemy AI. If you're familiar with like Uncharted, where you're supposed to be able to tank hits between cover and then like heal, regenerate your health while you're staying behind cover, because the enemies in this game have ridiculous accuracy. I remember I knew something was wrong when I started the game. In the game, they don't start you with a gun. You just have a melee attack, and every enemy shoots you 10 times before you can get to them and hit them. And I was like, okay, well, at least when I have a gun in the game, I'll be able to shoot from a distance. They hit you every time. Every time they hit you. This isn't like Ratchet and Clank. Think like old Ratchet and Clank games where like you see a bullet coming and you just move out of the way. It's not like that. These are shooting Uncharted speeds almost, in terms of like they're shooting real bullets at you basically. And so you're just constantly getting hit and taking hits and being like, well, I don't know what they wanted me to do. And the game doesn't have any cover mechanics, so it's just you just strafe, but you're getting hit regardless. I did not like this, and it went on for so long. And they also have some like ship sequences where you're like flying in space and doing like Star Fox levels akin to like Ratchet and Clank Tools of Destruction, and these are long and unfun, and it's like whatever. Similarly, you're getting hit all the time even though you feel like you're doing everything you can to dodge, and the checkpointing is whatever. The game also has like shops like Ratchet and Clank does, where you can upgrade your weapons or you can buy new weapons, but the game has like 9 chapters, and I feel like only like half of them have even a single weapons shop in them. So, and it's also where you equip a gun. So, I don't know what they were thinking. This game was nowhere near the quality of Pumpkin Jack. Pumpkin Jack was great. Make a second Pumpkin Jack before you think about touching this again. This sucked. I don't know. I don't want to think about it anymore. We have another new game. We have Clock Tower Rewind. This is what I was sort of alluding to at the start when I said we had a game that sort of came out this year. I do count Western releases as releases for us as new games. So this is a port that we never got this game in the West. It's a little horror game from... When did this game come out? You know about this game, right? Because you're the one who told me about it.
Yeah, I think it came out like 1990 something.
Okay, so late 90s we're thinking? Mid to late 90s?
Let me look.
We fact-checking this?
1995.
All right. Well, this game was definitely really cool. You and I played this on Halloween. We knocked out a couple of the endings, then we went back and you played and got some endings. It's really cute. It's a cute little horror game. It's got great atmosphere. It's got good mechanics. It's kind of Metroidvania in the aspect of going around and looking for stuff to unlock new areas and unlock new scenes. And finding the different endings was all pretty fun and intuitive. It's it's just a good time all around. There's not much to say about it as far as
Yeah.
it's got a simple story. You got to avoid the scissor man killing you and figure out what's going on. Maybe save your friends along the way, your fellow orphans, I should say. Well, I don't know if they're friends, but it's a good time. I would say this ranks somewhere in the high B.
And you can like it's actually kind of scary.
Oh yeah, for
I
sure.
I thought it was gonna be too goofy to be scary, especially since I had already seen like some people talk about it and play it, and I thought it was too goofy for me to get scared, but I got scared a couple times. So
Yeah, the opening cutscene that they added to this remaster that makes it look goofy definitely did not do the actual content of the game justice. You and I were
yeah, I
spooked.
don't know what that was about.
In that first run, anytime the Scissor Man showed up, I was jumping. And he's not
Yeah,
that scary. He's manageable, but I don't know. They managed to make it work. It's very good. The game has some very creepy imagery as well, so it doesn't scare in the jump scare department really. It scares in more of a creepy atmosphere, which is what I prefer for sure. But yeah, it was just a great time. I look forward to getting the rest of the endings and platinuming the game. It should be pretty easy.
yeah.
All right, we have another game that we have to talk about here at a little bit of length. We have Xenoblade Chronicles 2. And so the running theme with these first three Xenoblade Chronicles games is that I was going into each of them like, okay, I didn't really like that last one, but this next one, I'm gonna love this next one. And then what happened was that I didn't. So we have Xenoblade Chronicles 2 here, which is floating around low C, high D, just letting it out. I do not get this game at all. It I went into this game and see I'm going to say the things that do not bother me because I think some people have assumptions about what makes Xenoblade Chronicles 2 polarizing, and it's not the reasons that I have. So I knew the game had a gacha system for its blades, its unlockable characters that you sort of equip and play with. I knew about that going in. Seemed fine to me, like could be cool. I knew about the anime trope stuff that wasn't really in Xenoblade Chronicles 1 that's in 2. Totally fine with that. Women, that's also a controversial aspect of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Gives very the girls have to cover their shoulders because it distracts the boys' energy when people are like, I don't like the jiggle physics and I don't like the outfits the girls wear. It's too revealing. Like, are you serious? I knew about that. Listen, I put a Neptunia game in B tier. I'm cool. All right? That stuff
I'm
doesn't bother
cool.
me. That stuff doesn't bother me. But the issues that I ended up having with the game were largely with the combat. So the combat in this game, they basically take the, cooldown timers, the game from Xenoblade 1 and from X, and they make it like really slow. So, first of all, in Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and X, when you get into combat with enemies, and I do feel the need to explain this because I need someone to tell me if I missed something and I could fix this because otherwise I really want to enjoy the game. But when you get into combat in those first two games, your movement speed stays the same as if you're outside of combat. So you can move pretty quickly, and this is important because many of your skills are related to where you are in proximity to the enemy. So it'll be like bonus damage if you attack from the side, bonus damage if you attack from the back. So you want to be able to move around, and while you're positioning yourself and using skills, your character is also auto-attacking. They screwed this up. Both of those aspects they screwed up in Xenoblade 2. So first of all, when you get into combat with enemies in Xenoblade 2, your movement speed drops to like it feels like less than half of the speed of when you're just walking around. You go so slow, it's unbearable. It literally makes you not want to move. It just makes you want to stay wherever you are. Just start the battle where you want and just hope that enemies will move in the way you want. And then on top of that, whenever you do move, your character stops auto attacking. And this is the worst game to do this because in this game, rather than your skills running on cooldown timers, your skills actually charge up from hitting the auto attack. So if you move around to position around the enemy, you are losing time that your skills could be building up because your character will stop auto attacking. And then on top of that, the game also wants to incentivize you to do what's called art canceling, which is where you use a skill at the end of one of your auto attacks, and your auto attacks, all the auto attacks in this game go on a 3-hit process. And if you get more rewards, the more into that 3 hits you go before you do an art cancel. So it's this incredibly annoying combat system where you're constantly, if you move around to get to an enemy, like God forbid the enemy is mobile and they walk around, which some do. Some actually move around the battlefield, so you're constantly not attacking. But then once you finally start attacking, you have to wait for them to do all three of their slow auto attack parts and then do the art cancel to charge up another meter that you have. And it's just a nightmare. The game is so slow. The game also tricked me early on because the lead male character Rex and the lead female character, they have moves that spawn potions. This is like one of the big ways that you can heal yourself during combat. You do the move and it'll drop a little potion on the field. These never go anywhere near you. Maybe you have a 1 in 10 chance that a potion will fly somewhere near your character and you can just go pick it up. Otherwise, you'll want to get your heal and they'll put the potion on the opposite side of the enemy. So you have to slog your way over. It's just nothing's intuitive. It feels like everything was designed to be more annoying. Because if they just didn't change all these things, if you just kept auto attacking while you were moving, or if you moved at normal speed, or both, the game wouldn't be broken. It would just be fun and you wouldn't constantly feel like you're getting frustrated throughout battles. Also, enemy health in this game is crazy off the charts. You could fight an enemy 10 levels below you and the fight will be like 5 minutes long. Even if you're doing all your blade combos and you're doing all your art canceling and you end with a chain attack, it'll still take 5 minutes to kill enemies. And by the end of the game, you're just skipping enemies because the fights only get longer the further you get in the game. They only get more annoying. So the biggest issue I have with Xenoblade 2 is just the combat. The combat is not fun. I don't get it. People say that the combat picks up like, oh, once you have all your tools, then it's like the best combat system in the series. And I'm like, it's still just doing one thing. So the game locks you out of its combat for most of the game. Like I would say more than half of the game you do not have access to all your tools because you don't get access to like chain attacks and a third party member that can actually equip a full equipment set of blades until like chapter 5, I want to say. And then there's like 2 chapters later in the game where they take that stuff away again, or they take away your main blades like Pyra and Mithra, they take them away, or they put you in a dungeon where you can't do blade combos, which screws everything up, or they put you in a section where you have no party members. So it screams to me that they weren't confident in the combat system at all, because even when they finally give it to you, there's still numerous moments in the story, long periods. Again, these games are like 80 hours long or more if you're doing side content. It just feels like they weren't confident in the combat system. You barely get to use it, and when you do, it's just, okay, you do a bunch of blade combos and a chain attack. Like, that's not, whoa, a crazy depthful combat system. So if I miss something, someone's got to let me know, because maybe I really didn't understand. The game is known for having terrible tutorials that you can't ever review. They give you tutorials that are poorly timed. Like, I think they gave me the tutorial on character switching at the start of the game when I couldn't switch to any characters. Thanks a whole lot for that. Literally unhelpful. And then I forgot about it for the whole rest of the game, and not once, I think, in the whole game did I play as somebody else other than Rex. Because by the time I remembered I could do that, I was like, whatever. I don't want to mess around. I just want this to be over because I hate it, and I just want these fights to be over. The progression system and the leveling system is also pretty poor in this game. The blades, all your blades, they have like a skill tree, but instead of you just using like a level up currency of some kind to level it up, it's like do the most annoying things ever. So they'll be like, okay, well, to level up this blade's skill, fight 5 enemies. And it could be anywhere. It's an open world game with 50 maps and a million enemy types. And it says it's some indistinguishable word that you can't even pronounce. It's go fight 10 of these, and then the skill will upgrade. So you just gotta bust out a guide, and I didn't feel like it. So it didn't happen.
And you know me, I hate guides.
Right, I hate having to look up a guide for a game. It's very defeating. And there's also on their skill tree, it's like use their favorite food, and I'm like, oh my god. The food mechanic in this game is crazy. I'm not going to sit here and put 20 pieces of food in my inventory and just hope that it's it. And I don't want to pull up a guide, and then I pull up a guide, and then it's like, okay, this is their food. Well, how do I get it? And it probably ends up being something really annoying to actually craft it or to buy it. I don't know. It's just bogged down, which is frustrating because this game completely removed equipment, which was annoying in the first 2 Xenoblade games. And it removed most of the annoying stats. or at least I didn't notice them. If they were still in, they didn't play a role. And the story's not that bad. I think it had, just like Xenoblade 1, just like X, it has a very strong start to the story, but it just takes too long to keep things going. And I would say that I understand if people don't like Rex, I totally get it. Because in the middle of the story, he acts like a little baby, and it's just so weird. I was like, bro, you gotta cut that out. This is not cool. He should not have bagged all 3 of these women. He ends up having a harem of women by the end. I don't know how. He kind of lost me there. He was scaring the hoes big time.
That's crazy.
Right. So I don't know. I didn't get Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I'd say it's very borderline D tier. Very close. I don't want to play this game again anytime soon. I was even tempted to make a video illustrating all of my issues with it as sort of a plea to the community to help me figure it out. The game is just horribly long too. It's like one thing that I have to mention that you and I talked about constantly is that the game often feels like a walking to cutscene simulator. Again, not showing too much faith in its combat system. It really locks you into hours upon cutscenes throughout the game. And there were several times where you and I would pause in the middle of a cutscene, and that would be our taking a break moment, because it would just be going on forever. And I don't know, the story's not bad, but it doesn't justify its length. And it doesn't justify having a million hour-long cutscenes, that's for sure. But yeah. Next up, we have a refreshing game. After Xenoblade Chronicles 2, I was really like, I gotta play a good game. I can't risk it. That's literally what I felt. I was in such a low point for the year. I was like, I can't risk playing a second bad game in a row. So, I had Metroid Prime Remastered sort of on the back burner for a while. This is a game that I think is fantastic. It's one of few games that I would say, like, I can only think of 2 off the top of my head that I would say this about, but it is truly a 10 out of 10 game, I think, objectively speaking. I don't love it enough to rank it higher than a bunch of these other games that aren't perfect, but have, like, a lot of stuff that really resonates with me. But it's a fantastic game. It was tons of fun to play through. It ranked very highly a few years ago when I played the original version on GameCube, and I'm counting the remaster as its own separate game for my own sanity, because again, I did not want to play another. I did not want to risk playing another really annoying game after Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and I knew I had Metroid Prime Remaster on the shelf for just a moment like this. Just a moment when all seemed lost about this industry. I had something ready. So thankfully I had this. I'm going to put it at the very back end of S tier. It definitely is an S tier game. But again, I have so many like little weird things with all these other games that I'm not going to put it higher. But it's an excellent game. Anyone who hasn't played it should play it. I think it's a perfect introduction to first-person shooters and Metroidvanias. And it's just got great progression. It's got great immersion. One of the features that I always praise, that I'll praise here, is how it gets you back on track when you've been meandering around for a while, when you've been wandering about, not going near the objective, and it just, your map will very within well considered in an immersive way will notify you where you need to be going. I love stuff like that because it means that, one, I'm not lost for too long, but I don't feel like the game is embarrassing me. And also, I know where not to go if I just want to keep exploring. So I love that stuff. It's a fantastic game. It's a ton of fun. Next up, we have Ghostwire Tokyo. This was a sort of late addition to the roster for this year because it was free on PlayStation Plus, and it was developed by Tango Gameworks, the same people who made Hi-Fi Rush. And I liked the game. I thought it was pretty fun. I think it's another B-tier title. I would say that it's probably a little worse than Hi-Fi Rush, but I don't know. Because, again, Hi-Fi Rush, I liked it a lot, but I couldn't really connect with it in every way. I'll put it a little lower. I'll put it right below Clock Tower. The thing I really liked about Ghostwire was, one, I thought it had a decent story and decent characters, and I thought it had a really cool world to explore. It's got this very rich, intricately detailed Japanese city to explore, and it's got a lot of cool folktale stuff. I just messed something up. It's got a lot of cool folktale stuff and Japanese like stories, and it was just really cool. I liked all the stuff with the yokai, and the combat wasn't that fun, which is kind of what knocks it down low, and the story's just kind of average. But, you know, you saw me play a lot of this one.
It looked kind of corny to me.
It was a little corny,
I watched you. I'm watched you boot it up, and then I watched you for like maybe the first hour or two, and it just looked really corny, and I just wasn't really interested in watching you play the rest of it.
Yeah, it was a quicker title, so that was, it didn't overstay its welcome. The combat's like this first-person shooter with like little magic elements type thing, but none of the enemies, like I think, had health bars or the bosses, so it was kind of confusing, and it was kind of trial and error in that aspect to figure out if what I was doing was right. But I really just liked exploring the world. That was what I got out of it. So in that sense, it was pretty good, and the combat and story were inoffensive. And then let's see, we actually have to scroll down here and start getting, because now our B tier has become so large. So next we have Balatro. This one, I am ashamed to say that the Game Awards had to convince me to get this before the Game Awards. I played it before the award show. But when the nominees were announced, I was interested in it. Indies don't, especially a roguelike card-playing game indie, is a very weird choice to make top cut for that show. And I was very intrigued by it, and it is an excellent game. This game, I don't know if it's better than Rogue Legacy 2. I would probably put it right here. It's an incredibly fun game. This game is solid. It's got a wealth of content to enjoy as well. So basically, I mean, it's so hard to explain because you and I saw a video on it before the Game Awards, and we kind of just were like, whatever, we don't get it, and then moved on. And once it was nominated, we're like, okay, there's something up here. It's really a game you have to experience. I got the game, and I didn't even pop it in immediately. And when I did, it immediately clicked. It was so much fun. I was playing it for till 4 in the morning. I was having so much fun playing it. It's just so simple, but with a high skill ceiling. It's got a lot of depth. There's a lot of creativity in the game to sort of edit your runs. Of course, basically the premise is that you are playing poker hands and altering your deck over the course of a game and adding little things like modifiers, like joker cards, which give you effects to keep up with a scaling difficulty to eventually make it through 8 rounds. Not rounds, it's 8 antes of 3 rounds each. It's very cool. There's no point in me explaining it because I could never explain it better than someone who explained it to me, and I still didn't get it. I'm not there. But it is an incredibly addictive little card game. It's got a wealth of content. It's got so many different decks to play that each have their own abilities on top of them, and then there are so many different difficulty settings. I think there's like 8 or 9 difficulties that you can then run each deck on, and then they have unlockable challenges, and doing little things for trophies and in-game achievements will unlock more options in the game. It's just so much fun. It's just very addicting. It's fun. It's an awesome roguelike. I love the genre already, obviously, with Rogue Legacy 2, and I mentioned Spelunky as well earlier. And it's just great pick up and play, do around kind of fun stuff. I love it. Next up, we have a bunch of Game of the Years. Well, in a row, sort of. We have another indie game, Neva. And this is coming from the same studio that brought us Gris, and you and I both played that last year, I think, and really enjoyed it, especially the art style. This game has a very similar one, so we both picked it up and played through it, and it was fine. It wasn't really as good as Gris. The big compliment I can give it probably is that it does have an actual combat system, whereas Gris wasn't combat focused at all, and I do like, dodging and slashing away at enemies, Hollow Knight-esque. It's not there, obviously, depth-wise. But the story is just kind of okay. It's kind of in one ear and out the other. But I know you had a lot of thoughts on this one.
No, it's just, it looked good, but it was really boring. Like, the story, I didn't get it. Also, I was annoyed because in the beginning, she failed because she was too weak. And then in the end, when the same exact thing happened, I thought that it would go differently, and it did not, and that frustrated me to no end.
Right, so that was it was annoying. The protagonist, I really wanted to like the protagonist. We talked about this a lot, but she just doesn't have a lot of agency. There's a lot of confusing things that happen in the story, like when Neva leaves in one of the later chapters, and we're like, why did my dog leave? And then when she comes back, the daddy dog isn't there anymore, and it's like, well, where did he go? And then, like you said, the game is sort of does a little, poetry so that it rhymes moment, where the same thing that happened at the start happens again, and we're just like, really? We're gonna suck again? So yeah, I did like Neva growing up throughout the game and becoming more a part of combat. I thought that was cool. And again, I like the combat and I like the visuals. So it's still a B tier game. It's still good. Still check it out, especially if you have like, I don't know, 3 hours to kill, because it's very quick, just like Gris. But yeah, it's just fine. Then we have Animal Well, the indie game that Video Game Donkey was promoting. So we were obviously wanting to check this out all year. And also, it didn't get nominated for Game of the Year like Balatro, but it was in the indie game category. So, and it's a lot of fun. It's got a really cool atmosphere, and it's one of those types of games where it doesn't hold your hand at all. It doesn't really tutorialize anything at all. You just kind of got to figure everything out for yourself. And that was cool for a game that's short and simple. They can get away with something like that, and it was a lot of fun. I would say, it's a Metroidvania, definitely worth checking out. It's got some cool abilities. It's got a lot of cool secrets too. I didn't 100% it, but that is how you get the true ending. So there's that. There is more fun to have with the game, but I'm just gonna stick it around, I guess, right below Clock Tower, because again, Clock Tower was just so cool, in what it was doing. But it's probably better than most of these other games. Then we have the December game. So we're already here at the tail end. We have Nier Replicant. This was sort of to be my own It's Like Poetry So That It Rhymes type moment, because I played Nier Automata in the first game in January. First game in December is Nier Replicant. And this is, of course, a sort of remaster of the original Nier, the Japanese PS3 version. The one where Nier is a young boy, a young man, rather than the PS3 Nier that we got in the West, which was old man Nier. And again, I like this game more than Nier Automata. Again, I think even with the changes, because I do prefer the older Nier, I just think it kind of works, the father and daughter relationship. I guess I fell for it, just like everyone in the West falls for with their God of Wars and their Last of Us with their father and child relationships. I fell for it again.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm just as big an idiot as everybody who loves these games. So I do prefer that dynamic for the original Nier. I'm an idiot. But this version is still fine. It's still really good. It's still the same story. I don't think it would really rank differently. I think they'd both be solid B-tier games for me if we did this last year as well. Let me see. Where am I thinking?
Tisk.
I'm not sure where this one's going to want to go. It's probably higher than some of these indie games. I'd probably put it right above Hi-Fi Rush. It's fine. It's got a good story. I'm excited to experience the new Kaine content. I've been informed by the internet that you can play as Kaine in this game, but you have to beat the other 4 endings first, and I'm just not in a place to do that again. That's just a huge waste of my time right now. So unfortunate. They should have made that more accessible. Next up, we have Life is Strange Double Exposure. This one was interesting. You got to experience the first 2 Life is Strange games this year at my recommendation, and you enjoyed those quite a bit.
Yeah. I'm a diehard fan now.
Right. Maybe not a diehard fan of this one, though.
No.
But we also didn't hate it as much as other people. I think this
it was fine.
Right, I think this one's another B tier, maybe below maybe around here. Basically, it's a, follow-up on the original Life is Strange in a lot of ways. It, of course, is the return of Max Caulfield as the protagonist, who was also the protagonist in the original. And the story kind of parallels the original Life is Strange in some interesting ways. It kind of takes what we know about that game and flips it on its head with how the powers work and how other people react and how the story is. It's just not as interesting or as pointed as the original Life is Strange. And I do think that there's enough weird canon stuff here that even for someone like us you and I aren't really Max and Chloe shippers, and we're not save Chloe ending people. So we're like the group of people who would be the least offended by this game, which sort of spits in the face of both of those fan bases. But I still don't really want to consider this to be definitive canon following Life is Strange. It's a little too hokey. It's a little too ridiculous. It kind of goes all out on some of the crazy concepts. And that's fine. I get what they were going for, and it does have some interesting choices to make. Though in this game, definitely the choices were more confusing. There were definitely choices that we made that we weren't really sure what the game was asking us, like the one with agreeing to talk to the private investigator or the policeman, whatever he was, and we weren't really sure what they were asking us to do because we just went through the trouble of undermining that guy. And so it's like, we're just gonna lie to him. Apparently it's not. Moses would be mad at us if we agreed to talk to that guy. So it was a weird sort of game. It wasn't as strong as the other Life is Strange games that we played even before the storm. It wasn't really as strong as that, but it's fine. It's a fine little distraction. It was nice to hear Max again, and I think some of the characters like Safi and Moses were, they were likable characters for most of the story. I think the ending seems to have bothered a lot of people because it's sequel baiting. I mean, games do that. That's not a new thing or really a taboo thing for games to do, to be like, well, yeah, we want to do a big sequel, so this was kind of a setup. But I guess it just bothered a lot of people because maybe Life is Strange isn't really about that. I don't know. If they make another one of these games, we will play it. We will buy it.
Yeah.
We're not quite where we're at with Pokemon, where we won't buy it new. We'll still buy it when it comes out, and we'll play it. And if it sucks, we'll be mad. And if it's not, we'll say, that's great. But we'll say it's not canon, of course. We'll say none of these games are canon.
Yeah.
The original Life is Strange is just so timeless and just so excellent, and is oozing with quality and detail and emotion. So when a game comes out and it's really just okay, that's enough for us to be like, ew, I would rather just have my imagination than have just okay.
Yeah.
But you and I are definitely excited to play some of the other Life is Strange games. You and I are now all caught up. Each of us have played the same 3 Life is Strange games. So I'm very excited to play 2 and True Colors, maybe sometime next year, since we haven't played those yet. And then we just have 2 games left to talk about. This one will be quick. It's Nekopara Volume 4. It's a Christmas-themed game, so what a better time to play it than December. I'm going to put this one a little higher than Volume 3. It's, of course, got all the same problems that all the Nekopara games have, which is that it's borderline not a game, so it really doesn't deserve to be any higher than a high D. Again, it's our border between okay, neutral to bad. But I put 4 above 3 just because this game does try to have an actual story. It tries to actually wrap up the sort of overarching mentioned little happenings going on. Basically, the story in the Nekopara games is that the protagonist opens a confectionery shop, sort of in opposition to his father, so that he can sort of strike it out on his own and prove that he's good at making sweet treats and stuff like that. And finally, all that setup, and it's brought up in all the games. Finally, in 4, it comes to a head, and we actually get to meet the family and sort of go through that arc, and the main protagonist has to figure out his style and figure out how to make good sweets that would impress his dad, and they travel out of the country. So, at the very least, it's got a story where you're like, I wonder what's going to happen. I wonder what's going on, and it kind of feels like you're paying off a lot of setup from the other games and a little bit of setup in this game. So, all in all, it's probably the best one of these games story-wise. It's got the most interesting stuff going on. It feels like it's got interesting production value since, for the first time you travel out of the country in one of these games and meet some new characters. You meet a ton of characters in this game that have only been mentioned. Again, the family. There's also the mentor character that taught the protagonist everything they know. Or not everything they know, but inspired them greatly to strike it out on their own. And it's just all pretty cool. This game also has the best opening, both in theme and in animation. It's very cool. So that's about it. And then our finale game, and this is something I've always done. I want to say pretty much every time is the final game of the year is the big ending of the franchise theme. So we have Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and I've had a lot of bad things to say, unfortunately, about Xenoblade Chronicles, both the original game, which is beloved, Xenoblade X, which is inaccessible for most, and Xenoblade 2, which is at least polarizing, so some people might agree with me thinking it's not good. Xenoblade Chronicles 3, though, is actually a good game. This surprised me. I was actually making jokes all December long, leading up to me popping this game in, that I was dreading playing it, and it ended up being an excellent game. It ended up being really good. The characters... So, gameplay-wise, some of the problems are fixed. Not all of them, but enough of them that you don't really feel it. The game's combat is much quicker in this one. Instead of having a 3-person party like in 1 and 2, and a 3 to 4-person party like X forces you into, one or the other most of the time, this game has a whopping 7-person party. And you've got numerous classes that you can switch characters between, and you're constantly getting new hero classes, which are your 7th party member, that you can swap out, and also teach your other characters, your main party members, how to use those classes. So it keeps the variety really high. There's a lot of quality of life improvements in this one, one of which is being able to switch playable characters during combat and while exploring without menuing at all. It's just a simple click of 2 buttons, I think. And that really changed the game. This was the one Xenoblade game where I finally started swapping between characters, and frequently at that. All of the character classes are fun to mess around with and play with. They come in varieties of attackers, healers, and defenders, but then all the different hero classes you get are different variations that have twists on them. So it's really fun throughout the game to experiment with the different types of healers, defenders, and attackers. And you also, while you're leveling them up, you're unlocking permanent skills that you can equip to any class, and it just keeps the whole game's progression very fluid. And this is the only Xenoblade game that I felt like earned its runtime, gameplay-wise. It keeps everything really fresh throughout. You're constantly getting new classes that you can mess around with. And again, it's really easy to switch between those characters, so it's just incredibly fun. The open worlds are not as big and empty as Xenoblade 2 and X's were, so you actually feel like exploring. We didn't talk about questing in any of these games. Most of the time, quests are really bad. They're like your worst RPG quests that you can think of, like find these items, you have no idea where to go. In this game, there's still that from time to time, but most of the quests in this game, well, I say most, all of the quests in the game are rewarding to some extent, because you're either doing a lame quest like that, but it's giving you points towards permanent upgrades like running speed upgrades, swimming speed upgrades, item drop upgrades. Every like town in this game, town equivalent that you find in this game, the quests that you participate in its area will level up that town, and getting them up ranks will give you those permanent upgrades that I was mentioning. And then the other types of quests are hero quests, which will either give you a whole new class to work with, which is awesome, or it will upgrade one of the classes you already have so that you can level it up further and get new permanent skills off of it. So gameplay-wise, this game is just a ton of fun. The issue from the old games, there is still cooldown timers the game, but it returns to form with the amount of skills you have on offer, compared to Xenoblade 2, which put you with like 3 skills on each of your blades, but it's really cumbersome to switch between blades, so you really feel like you just have 3 available. In this game, you have like 3 available, plus you have the interlinking mechanic, which gives you a whole new set of skills, plus some of your characters get second skill sets that they can equip during battle, like Noah gets. So it's just incredibly versatile. I was shocked with how many options you have in combat in this game. And again, the increased party size just gives you so much room for flexibility and experimenting, especially in the early game, figuring out what you like to do with the game. The story in this game is also really fun. I talked about it a little bit in the Xenoblade Chronicles 1 section, that the party and the story was just kind of meanders around. Xenoblade 3, not so much. It sticks with its story pretty much all the way through, and everything sort of feels like you're getting the correct pacing of important events. And a lot of it is just about survival. Xenoblade 3 is just survival and figuring out the mystery while traveling somewhere, and you have your party all at once. So the whole game you're able to get strong character interactions. This is easily the strongest party, the closest knit party you have. Characters like Lance, like Tyon, they are incredible in terms of their interactions with the other party members. It's not like the other Xenoblade games where you might get a character, like 40 hours into the game, and then they're not allowed to talk in any of the cutscenes, like Ricky. And all the characters are in the same boat. Everyone is sort of unified with their one goal, unlike maybe like Xenoblade 2 and 1's characters, who kind of just feel like they have their own things going on, and when they get their spotlight, then they're done for the rest of the game. No one ever feels like they've fallen by the wayside. Everyone has stuff to do. Everyone has something to say about the situation, and it just makes it feel a lot tighter. And again, the game is a lot more, I don't know if I want to say realistic, but relatable. The characters are just out to survive and escape their bad fate. It's kind of very Final Fantasy 13-esque, but maybe with the characters being even more tighter knit from the start and feeling a little bit closer. So, all in all, I just really like the game. The only bad thing I really have to say about the game that I think kicks it out of S tier is it not having a great ending. The ending is one of those really pretentious ones where everything's up to interpretation, and everyone online, you check and see if someone will give you some solace with their fan theory, and everyone just has crazy, ridiculous theories that don't make any sense and just make you mad. So basically, I have to look at this game's ending and just headcanon in whatever I would like the ending to be, which isn't super satisfying, but it's the only way I'll live because I actually cared about the characters and didn't want horrible things to happen to them. But yeah, that's where we're at. So that was the last game of the year. So our 10, this is the full list of all 47 games. Our 10 games, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we have the full S tier, and then Xenoblade Chronicles 3. So are you ready to tell what your 10 were?
Yeah.
So what were your 10? What was your picks?
Okay, so I did get some, but I got blindsided a couple times. Okay, so first I put Balatro,
Okay.
Metroid Prime,
Okay.
Shadow Generations, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon.
Oh, I mean, so far so good.
But then I put Final Fantasy VIII,
Mm-hmm.
which you put pretty low.
I didn't put it low. It's an A tier.
Okay, yeah, it's an A tier. But yeah. And then I put Hypnospace Outlaw.
Okay.
I thought it would go higher, but I was wrong.
Also an A tier, though. So, close.
Yeah. And then I put Infinite Wealth.
Oh, wow. I don't know why you did that. I mean, it actually is close. It is close, but
Yeah, it is close.
you
but,
knew I had a
know,
lot of
it's
negative
like-
things to say about that one.
But at the end of the day, a bad Yakuza game is still better than the average game.
That is true.
So I was like, I'm going to gamble with that one. And then I put Stellar Blade, obviously,
Mhm.
which is crazy because I didn't think it was going to be number one. I was like, this is cutting it, right? And then I put Persona 5 Tactica.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised you thought that was going to rank really high. I thought that was going to be a blindside as high as it was.
I was paying attention this year. You didn't know. I was paying attention this year to you playing games, okay? And then my final one, I put Rogue Legacy.
Okay, so you got 6. You got 6 right.
Let's go.
That's pretty good. So you missed Paper Mario. You missed
Yeah, I did.
Astrobot, Fossil Fighters, and Xenoblade 3. I actually thought I gave you some good hints that Xenoblade 3 was going to make it, even though it did. Now I'm looking at it, barely made it. But I thought I gave you some hints that it was a surprise turnaround for Xenoblade Chronicles by the end of the year.
Yeah, I thought it was a surprise turnaround for Xenoblade, but I didn't think it was high enough to get top 10. You know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm shocked, but I didn't think. And Paper Mario, I don't know. When you were playing it, I didn't get the vibe that you were like, this is so awesome. I didn't get that vibe.
I don't know. I feel like maybe you weren't paying attention, but that's all good. You were, but I did like it. I liked it a lot. I thought it was really high quality. So all in all, I think the year really came together by the end. Early on, I was feeling a little sour on the year, and maybe that's because, I mean, look how high Infinite Wealth ranked, and it was a really disappointing title. Again, it sort of got mercy points because it was Yakuza, because there were so many quality aspects of it outside of the story. I will say I did look at this ahead of time. This is the only year where a Western released Yakuza game was eligible for the list, but none made top 10. There were none featured in the top 10. Every other year, a Yakuza game is in the top 10 when there is a release. So that's interesting. But it was close. It was close to the top 10. I'm surprised how close it got. Maybe I need to rearrange some things, because I don't think Infinite Wealth should have been that high. I don't really like how high it ended up being.
I mean, I felt like it was still good though, and it had a lot of good moments. But it's another one of those things where it's like the ending can really sour the rest of the game.
It did. And everything Kiryu and Ichiban. I don't like Ichiban anymore. I mean, that frustrates me.
Yeah, they kind of ruined his character.
they made his character more like SpongeBob or something, or like the annoying orange. He's unrealistically optimistic. He's unrealistically stupid,
Yeah, and
right?
I know they're trying really hard to do like opposite Kiryu, but they missed the mark. They did it correctly in the first
In
one, and then
seven,
this
right?
one they just missed the mark. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't get it. So yeah, this is the tier list. This is how it's shaken out. I think some people will definitely disagree with Stellar Blade being so high. Again, it's just so much fun, and the exploration was so much fun. Um, and when I go out and platinum a game, that means I really enjoyed it. So I felt a big connection to that game. And then all these other ones, I'm pretty safe on, like Astrobot, Mystery Dungeon, Rogue Legacy 2, Balatro. Everything else in the S tier, except maybe Fossil Fighters, I feel like needs no defending. Like they're easy S ranks, you know. But yeah, all in all, well, that was a lot of fun. So what were the 2, 4, 6 again? Coffee before work, Dunkin' Donuts, and what was 6?
A Krispy Kreme, and
Oh
then
yes,
movie
that's right.
night.
And then movie night. Well, that's great. I can't wait to see what movie you pick.
I was so close to getting Build-A-Bear.
You were. If only you believed in Paper Mario like you did when you ranked it. Things could have been
I
different.
didn't believe in you.
Well, that doesn't bode well. But anyway, it was a ton of fun. I would even be wanting to do this for previous years just to get them documented, or maybe give renewed thoughts on them, like to do 2023, 2, 1, 20, and 19. Just because, again, so many good games were played during those years. Some of these later years haven't had like the great franchises, like when I did the Souls games in 2022 and the GTA games in also 22 actually. That was a stacked year. That was also the Borderlands year, and that was the Genkai Toki year. That one had a ton of franchises, just like 20 did with like Ace Attorney, Devil May Cry, Star Fox, Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah.
Some of the early years were really stacked. I've run out of ideas with how to have like 10 franchise themes in one year. But also that's fine because I don't need to be rushing through games. It's better this way when it's just like 47 rather than what 2022 was 76 games. That would be a monster tier list. But anyway, this video is already an insane length. This is going to be, oh my god, it's going to be like a 3-hour video. Okay. Well, that's been great. Anyone who watched, I don't think anyone will. If you did, I'm so sorry that you did, because I just do want to apologize. But have a great rest of your day and stay safe.